Welcome to Crime for Sleep. Before we begin, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Story 1. The evening light filtered through half-drawn blinds, casting long shadows across Rebecca's newly unpacked living room. 3 days into her lease, and already the apartment felt like home, a sanctuary tucked away on the quiet side of Millfield, where the rent was surprisingly affordable for such a well-maintained building. The hardwood floors had a gentle give beneath her feet as she padded across the living room, a mug of chamomile tea warming her palms against the autumn chill that seeped through the old windows. It was just past 9 when she first heard a soft, deliberate footfall directly above her bedroom ceiling. The sound was faint but unmistakable, the careful weight of someone trying to move quietly across a floor. Rebecca paused, tilting her head slightly, waiting for confirmation that she wasn't imagining things. There it was again, a measured step, then another, moving slowly from one end of the room to the other. "Neighbors," she whispered to herself, relief softening her briefly tensed shoulders. The building was older, constructed in the 1940s when soundproofing wasn't a priority. Of course, she'd hear the occasional movement from upstairs. She took another sip of tea, letting the gentle steam rise against her face, and returned to unpacking the last of her books. The following morning, Rebecca encountered her landlord, Mr. Grayson, in the lobby. He was replacing a flickering bulb in the mail area, his silver hair catching the morning light that spilled through the entrance door. He greeted her with a smile that creased the corners of his eyes. "How's the new place treating you, Ms. Winters?" he asked, screwing the fresh bulb into place with practiced ease. "It's perfect," Rebecca replied, collecting her mail from box 2B. Then, remembering the footsteps, she added, "Though I can hear the upstairs neighbors a bit. Are they always up so late?" Mr. Grayson's hands stilled. The smile remained fixed on his face, but something flickered behind his eyes, confusion, perhaps, or concern. "Upstairs neighbors," he climbed down from his small step ladder. "There aren't any upstairs neighbors, Ms. Winters. That unit's been empty for years." A cool sensation spread across the back of Rebecca's neck. "But I heard footsteps last night above my bedroom." Mr. Grayson's smile faded entirely now. He folded the stepladder with deliberate care. Old buildings settle, pipes expand, and contract could be anything. "It sounded like footsteps," Rebecca insisted quietly, "very distinct." "Well," Mr. Grayson cleared his throat, "I keep that unit locked. Nobody's been up there since the previous tenants moved out in 2018. He checked his watch with exaggerated interest. "I should get going. Let me know if you need anything else." That evening, Rebecca found herself lying awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting. The room was wrapped in silence so complete she could hear the soft ticking of her watch on the nightstand. Outside, a gentle rain had begun to fall, tapping against her windows with rhythmic persistence. And then, just as she was drifting towards sleep, it came again. A step, then another, slow, measured footfalls moving across the floor above her. Rebecca sat up, heart quickening despite her attempts to remain logical. She switched on her bedside lamp, its warm glow pushing back the darkness but doing nothing to silence the steady movement overhead. Something compelled her to reach up and knock gently on the ceiling, 3 soft taps with her knuckles against the textured white surface. The footsteps stopped abruptly. Rebecca held her breath, ears straining in the sudden silence. 3 deliberate knocks echoed back. Rebecca didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat in her living room, a throw blanket pulled tightly around her shoulders, waiting for morning. When the first pale light of dawn filtered through her curtains, she called the non-emergency police number. "I'd like to report a possible break-in," she explained, voice steady despite her exhaustion. "Not in my apartment, the one above mine. It's supposed to be vacant." The two officers who responded, Ramirez and Collins, listened politely to Rebecca's account as they stood in her living room. Officer Ramirez, a woman with observant eyes and a notepad in hand, asked several questions about what Rebecca had heard. Officer Collins, meanwhile, seemed more interested in the building itself. "And your landlord confirmed the unit is empty?" Officer Ramirez asked. "Yes," Rebecca nodded. "He said it's been vacant for years." "Would you mind if we took a look upstairs?" Officer Collins asked, glancing toward the ceiling, "just to be sure everything's secure." 20 minutes later, Mr. Grayson arrived with a ring of keys, his expression a mixture of annoyance and concern. "This really isn't necessary," he muttered as he led the officers and Rebecca up the narrow staircase to the third floor. "That unit's been locked up tight." The hallway upstairs was dimly lit and smelled faintly of old carpet and dust. Mr. Grayson stopped at apartment 3B, directly above Rebecca's, and sorted through his keys with obvious reluctance. "Here we go," he said, finding the right one. The lock turned with a resistant groan, suggesting it hadn't been used in some time. The door swung inward, revealing darkness beyond. Officer Collins found a light switch just inside the door. A ceiling fixture flickered to life, illuminating an apartment that was impossibly fully furnished. "I don't understand," Mr. Grayson whispered, his face paling as he took in the sight before them. The apartment mirrored Rebecca's layout, but where hers was filled with new furniture and freshly unpacked boxes, this one contained worn, dated pieces that spoke of long habitation. A faded sofa faced a small television set that must have been at least 15 years old. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with paperbacks. A dining table held 4 place settings, plates, glasses, silverware arranged as if for a family meal. A thin layer of dust covered everything, but beneath it, the space felt lived in, abandoned perhaps, but recently. "Mr. Grayson," Officer Ramirez said quietly, "you said this unit was empty." "It was it should be," he stammered, his composure crumbling. "The Henderson family lived here years ago, but they moved out in 2018. I cleared everything out myself." Rebecca moved toward the hallway leading to the bedrooms, drawn by a strange compulsion. The master bedroom door stood ajar. Inside, the room was arranged just like hers below a bed positioned directly above where Rebecca slept, the nightstands in the same configuration. On one nightstand sat a framed photograph, its glass cloudy with dust. Rebecca picked it up carefully. 4 faces smiled back at her, a man, a woman, and 2 children, a boy and a girl, all with the same delicate features and dark hair. "The Hendersons," Mr. Grayson said from the doorway, his voice barely audible. "They were supposed to be gone." Officer Collins' radio crackled to life, making everyone start. He stepped into the hallway to respond, his murmured conversation creating a moment of normalcy in the surreal scene. When he returned, his expression had changed. "Mr. Grayson, we're going to need you to come down to the station. There are some questions we need to ask about the Henderson family." "What's happening?" Rebecca asked, setting the photograph down gently. Officer Ramirez turned to her. Ms. Winters, the Henderson family never moved out in 2018. They were reported missing by Mrs. Henderson's sister when they stopped answering calls. The case has been open ever since. In the stillness that followed, a soft sound came from somewhere in the apartment, the gentle tap of what might have been footsteps, or perhaps just the building settling, echoing through rooms that had held secrets far longer than Rebecca had lived below them. The investigation would continue for months, with forensic teams combing through the apartment above hers. Rebecca would give her statement many times over, but she never heard footsteps again after that night, and she never once knocked on her ceiling a second time, afraid of what might knock back. Story 2, the narrow hiking trail wound through the dense pines of Blackwater Forest, a place where shadows pooled like ink even on the brightest afternoons. Generations of hikers had walked this path, their footsteps compacting the earth into a ribbon of dark soil that meandered between moss-covered rocks and ancient tree roots. It was a familiar place to the locals, predictable in its quiet beauty, until that peculiar October day when everything changed. The air hung heavy with the scent of decomposing leaves and damp earth as Martin Geller, a 56-year-old history teacher, made his way along the trail. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, just taking his Sunday walk as he had done nearly every weekend for the past decade. The rhythm of his hiking boots against the soft ground created a metronome-like cadence that had always soothed his mind after a long week of lecturing restless teenagers. On this day, however, as thin beams of afternoon sunlight filtered through the canopy of branches above, Martin's foot caught on something partially buried beside the trail. He might have continued walking, might have dismissed it as another rock or fallen branch, but something about the way the object reflected the dappled light made him pause. Kneeling down, he brushed away the thin layer of soil and decaying leaves that had begun to claim it. A wallet, brown leather, weathered by exposure but still intact, not torn or damaged, just aged by the elements in a way that suggested it had been there for quite some time. Martin turned it over in his hands, feeling the weight of it, surprisingly substantial. The leather was stiff but not cracked, preserved somehow by the forest's particular chemistry of moisture and shade. Inside, the contents remained undisturbed, as if someone had simply set it down and walked away. A driver's license behind a plastic window showed a man with a pleasant smile and eyes that seemed to look directly at Martin. Raymond Klein, the name read, 38 years old at the time the photo was taken. An address in Oak Ridge, just 20 miles from where Martin now stood. Credit cards were still neatly arranged in their slots. A folded $20 bill remained in the billfold section. As the soft whisper of wind moved through the pines above him, Martin felt a peculiar unease settle over him. The wallet hadn't been emptied. It hadn't been discarded after a theft. It had simply been left or lost or hidden. The possibilities multiplied in his mind as he carefully placed it in his jacket pocket and continued toward town, his peaceful Sunday rhythm now disturbed by questions that had no obvious answers. The Oak Ridge police station smelled of coffee and paper. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting an unnatural pallor across the worn linoleum floor as Martin approached the front desk. Officer Sarah Timmons looked up from her computer, her expression professional but distracted, until Martin placed the wallet on the counter between them. "Found this on the Blackwater Trail," he explained, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet lobby. "Everything still inside. Thought someone might be looking for it." Officer Timmons reached for the wallet with casual interest that transformed into something else entirely as she opened it. Her fingers stilled. The color drained from her face in a subtle shift that Martin might have missed if he hadn't been watching her so carefully. "Where exactly did you find this?" she asked, her voice now measured, controlled in a way it hadn't been moments before. "About 2 miles in, just past the creek crossing," Martin replied, suddenly aware that something significant was happening. She nodded, then picked up her phone, pressing a single button before speaking quietly. "Chief, you're going to want to see this." Within minutes, Police Chief Daniel Wells emerged from a back office. He was a tall man with silver hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent decades navigating the complexities of human behavior at its worst. He took the wallet without a word, opened it, and let out a slow breath. "Raymond Klein," he said, the name hanging in the air between them. "He disappeared 15 years ago, just vanished, left his house for a morning run and never came back." The clock on the wall ticked steadily as Martin processed this information. 15 years. The wallet had been lying beside that trail for 15 years, through countless rainstorms and snowfalls, as thousands of hikers passed by without noticing. "The case went cold," Chief Wells continued, his voice low and resonant in the quiet room. "No body, no evidence of foul play, no activity on his accounts. His wife moved away after 5 years. She couldn't bear staying in the house, waiting for answers that never came." In the days that followed, the Blackwater Forest Trail became a corridor of activity as officers meticulously searched the area where the wallet had been found. Ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, teams of officers walking arm in arm through the underbrush. The local newspaper ran the story on its front page, reviving a mystery that had slowly faded from the town's collective memory. Detective Alina Reed, who had been just a rookie officer when Klein disappeared, took the lead on the reopened investigation. She spent hours in the evidence room, reviewing dusty boxes of statements and photographs. The wallet, now sealed in a plastic evidence bag, sat on her desk like a visitor from another time. "The strange thing," she explained to Martin when he came in to give his formal statement, "is that we searched that exact area when he first disappeared. Multiple times, that wallet wasn't there." Martin sat across from her, watching as she methodically placed photographs on the desk between them. Raymond Klein with his wife on their wedding day, Raymond coaching Little Leg, Raymond standing beside a new car, smiling proudly. "Someone put it there later," Martin suggested, the realization forming as he spoke the words. Detective Reed nodded slowly. "That's what we think, which means someone knows what happened to him. Someone has carried that secret for 15 years." The investigation gradually revealed threads that had been overlooked years before. A business partner with financial troubles around the time of the disappearance. A neighbor who had suddenly moved across the country 3 weeks after Raymond vanished. A cousin with a history of mental health issues who had been staying with the Kleins that summer. Old interviews were conducted again, memories probed for details that might have seemed insignificant then, but carried new weight now. People remembered differently after 15 years, some with greater clarity, others with stories that had shifted almost imperceptibly over time. In the quiet of the evidence room, Detective Reed noticed something no one had documented before. A small tear in the wallet's inner lining, barely visible unless you were looking for it, and behind that tear, pressed flat and hidden, a small key with no identifying marks. As autumn deepened into winter, the case of Raymond Klein became a whispered conversation throughout Oak Ridge. Theories spread from house to house, evolving with each retelling. Some said he had planned his own disappearance, tired of his life and ready to start anew. Others suggested darker possibilities, enemies, debts, secrets. The key eventually led to a storage unit registered under a company name that had ceased to exist a decade earlier. Inside, investigators found a single metal box containing documents that suggested Raymond had discovered accounting irregularities at the firm where he worked. Notes in his handwriting detailed specific transactions, names, dates. The truth, when it finally emerged, was neither dramatic nor sensational. It was a quiet kind of evil, the sort born from desperation rather than malice. A colleague who saw Raymond as a threat, a confrontation on a lonely forest road, a moment of violence followed by years of careful silence. The wallet had been placed on the trail deliberately, years later, by someone consumed by guilt who could no longer bear the weight of knowing but couldn't bring themselves to come forward directly. A compromise between confession and continued silence. As the case closed and justice slowly wound its way through the courts, Martin Geller often returned to the Blackwater Trail. He would stop at the spot where he had found the wallet, now marked by nothing more than his own memory, and listen to the whisper of the pines overhead. He couldn't help but wonder about all the other secrets these woods might hold, what else lay just beneath the surface, waiting for someone to notice what had been there all along. Story 3, The Hallway of the Marigold Inn, stretched longer than it appeared in the online listing, its carpet a faded burgundy that muffled footsteps to whispers. Detective Sarah Reeves stood motionless, her gaze fixed on the wall at the corridor's end where, according to the floor plans filed with the county, no door should exist. Yet there it was, a simple wooden door with peeling white paint and a tarnished brass handle that reflected the dim hallway light in fractured patterns. Mr. Chen discovered it during his stay last month, the hotel manager explained, his voice barely audible over the gentle hum of the ancient air conditioning system. Room 237 was supposed to be a standard suite, bedroom, bathroom, small sitting area, but he reported finding this door. When our staff came to check, there was nothing but solid wall. The detective's fingers traced the edge of her leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with similar accounts spanning back 3 decades. The Marigold Inn, built in 1962 on the outskirts of Lakeside, Oregon, had accumulated a troubling pattern of guest reports all describing the same phenomenon, a door appearing where architectural plans showed none, visible only to certain guests and only on certain nights. "And Mrs. Kelsey?" Detective Reeves asked, her tone measured and calm as her pen hovered above the notebook. The manager swallowed hard. She stayed in 237 for 2 nights. On the second night, she called the front desk at 2:17 a.m., agitated about sounds coming from the other room. When our night clerk came up, he found the room empty. Her luggage was still there, but Mrs. Kelsey was gone. Sarah pressed her palm against the wall where others claimed to have seen the door. The surface felt cooler than it should, as though the drywall separated the hallway not from another hotel room, but from somewhere much colder. She made a note without commenting. The disappearance of Alina Kelsey, a 42-year-old pharmaceutical sales representative from Seattle, marked the 3rd vanishing from room 237 in 18 years. Like the others before her, security cameras captured her entering her room but never leaving. The search of the premises revealed nothing unusual about the room's construction, no hidden passages, no architectural anomalies. Forensic teams had examined the wall repeatedly, using everything from thermal imaging to ground-penetrating radar. Each investigation concluded the same way. The wall was solid, with no space for a door or room behind it. Yet 12 different guests had independently reported seeing or hearing something beyond that wall. Back at the station, Detective Reeves spread the case files across her desk. The overhead fluorescent lights buzzed softly as she arranged crime scene photos in chronological order. The first disappearance occurred in 2006, David Masterson, a traveling insurance adjuster. Then in 2014, Amelia Rojas, a graduate student researching local folklore. Now Alina Kelsey. What connected these individuals? They shared no obvious characteristics, different ages, professions, backgrounds. Yet something had drawn them to room 237, and something had taken them through a door that supposedly didn't exist. Sarah's attention turned to the hotel's history. The Marigold Inn had been built by Thomas Whitaker, a local businessman who had disappeared himself shortly after the hotel opened. The detective pulled out county records, architectural plans, and historical photographs. In the original blueprints, where room 237 now stood, the plans showed something different, a small private office for the owner with a separate entrance. Days turned to weeks as the investigation progressed with methodical calm. Detective Reeves interviewed former employees, reviewed guest logs, and consulted with architectural historians. A pattern emerged from the disparate pieces of information, a subtle connection between the missing guests. Each had been carrying an object made of silver. Masterson, a pocket watch; Rojas, an antique locket; Kelsey, a sterling bracelet engraved with a pattern of marigold flowers. The detective returned to the hotel on a quiet Tuesday evening, the silver badge at her hip catching the amber glow of wall sconces. She had requested room 237, bringing with her a small silver letter opener that had belonged to Thomas Whitaker himself, an item discovered during her research at the local historical society. The night passed uneventfully until 2:17 a.m. when Sarah's eyes opened to darkness and the distinct sound of a door creaking on old hinges. At the end of the hallway where solid walls should be, a thin rectangle of pale blue light outlined a door that couldn't possibly exist. The recording from her body camera would later show Detective Reeves approaching the door slowly, the silver letter opener held loosely in her hand. "Lakeside Police," she announced, her voice steady despite the impossibility before her. The door opened at her touch, revealing not a room but a long corridor that seemed to stretch beyond the physical constraints of the building. The footage ended there, the final frame showing Sarah Reeves stepping across the threshold, the silver letter opener gleaming in her hand, her face set with determination rather than fear. The search for Detective Reeves continued for months, but like the others before her, she had vanished completely. Room 237 revealed nothing, and the door that wasn't in the hotel listing remained invisible to the officers who responded to the scene. The Marigold Inn closed its doors 6 months later, but the investigation remains open, a persistent mystery in the files of the Lakeside Police Department. Sometimes, late at night, the desk sergeant swears he can hear the sound of pages turning, as though an unseen detective is still working the case from the other side of an impossible door. Story 4, it wasn't supposed to be there. The town records showed an empty lot, nothing built on it for decades. But when the surveyors arrived, they found an old house, fully furnished, power still running. The neighbors swore it had never been there before, and inside, on the coffee table, sat a newspaper. The date on it hadn't arrived yet. The morning fog hung low over the vacant lot at the end of Maple Street when Thomas Jenkins, a county surveyor with 23 years of experience, pulled up in his weathered gray truck. The soft crunch of gravel beneath his boots broke the silence as he stepped out, clipboard in hand, breath visible in the cool autumn air. He was supposed to be marking boundaries for a new development project, a simple, routine job. The county records were clear. Lot 157 had been empty since 1978, when the previous structure had been demolished after a foreclosure. Jenkins paused, squinting through the dissipating fog. His pen hovered motionless above his paperwork. Where there should have been nothing but overgrown grass and perhaps a few trees, stood a two-story Victorian house, its dark green paint peeling slightly at the edges. A thin wisp of smoke rose from the chimney, curling into the milky sky. "This can't be right," he whispered to himself, the words forming small clouds that dissolved into the morning air. Detective Sarah Mercer received the call 3 hours later. Her coffee had long gone cold, forgotten beside a stack of case files that seemed to grow taller with each passing day. The voice on the other end belonged to her former partner, now working as the county clerk. "Sarah, we've got something unusual," he said, his typically confident voice tinged with uncertainty. "Jenkins found a house that shouldn't exist." The drive to Maple Street was quiet, only the occasional static from the police radio breaking the silence. Mercer had been a detective for 12 years, handling everything from petty theft to double homicides, but nothing in her experience prepared her for what awaited her at Lot 157. The house looked ordinary enough if somewhat neglected, Victorian style, with a small porch and ornate railings that spoke of craftsmanship from another era. A house that would blend perfectly into any historical neighborhood, except this one wasn't in any database, on any tax record, or on any map of the town. "The neighbors say it wasn't here yesterday," Jenkins explained, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might cause the structure to vanish. "Mrs. Abernathy has lived across the street for 40 years, says she's always had a clear view of the empty lot from her front window." Mercer nodded slowly, her trained eyes scanning the perimeter. No construction vehicles, no signs of recent building activity. The foundation looked weathered, settled into the earth as if it had been there for decades. "Have you been inside?" she asked. Jenkins shook his head. "Waited for you, doors unlocked though." The front door opened with a gentle creak, revealing hardwood floors worn smooth by years of footsteps. The air inside felt still, heavy with the scent of old books and something else, something Mercer couldn't quite identify. Perhaps it was simply the smell of abandonment, of spaces long undisturbed. The furniture was from another time, a green velvet sofa, a wooden radio cabinet, yellowed lace curtains that filtered the morning light into soft, dusty beams. Everything was meticulously arranged, as if waiting for residents who had stepped out momentarily. In the living room, a coffee table held a single object, a folded newspaper. Mercer approached it carefully, her steps echoing softly against the walls. She didn't touch it at first, simply leaning forward to read the headline. "Jenkins," she called, her voice unnaturally loud in the quiet house. "What's today's date?" "October 17th, he replied from the doorway, unwilling to step further inside. Mercer's gaze remained fixed on the newspaper. "This is dated November 3rd. She finally reached down to lift the paper, the pages crinkling beneath her fingers. "That's 17 days from now." The investigation proceeded methodically, though nothing about the case followed standard protocol. The house contained no personal items, no photographs, no mail, no clothing in the closets. The kitchen cabinets held dishes and canned goods, but nothing perishable. The power was indeed connected, but the utility company had no record of service at that address. No meter had ever been installed. On the second day, while examining the basement, Officer Luis Ramirez discovered a small door nearly concealed behind an old bookshelf. It opened to reveal a cramped room, walls covered entirely with newspaper clippings, hundreds of them, all with dates that hadn't yet occurred, headlines announcing events that hadn't yet happened, weather reports for storms not yet formed. Detective Mercer spent hours in that room, the beam of her flashlight moving slowly from clipping to clipping, some dated years into the future, some describing events so mundane they seemed pointless to record: local school board elections, minor traffic accidents, obituaries for people still living in the town. On the third day, forensics finally found fingerprints, a single set, throughout the entire house. They belonged to Martin Crowell, a local man who had been reported missing exactly 1 year earlier. His case had gone cold after months without leads. According to his wife, he had left for work one morning and simply never returned. The newspaper on the coffee table contained his obituary, cause of death unknown. By the fourth day, the investigation had drawn the attention of federal agencies. Men and women in dark suits arrived, asking questions but offering no identification. They took samples, photographs, measurements. They spoke in hushed tones, glancing occasionally at Detective Mercer with expressions she couldn't interpret. On the morning of the fifth day, Detective Mercer arrived at Lot 157 to find nothing but an empty field. The house had vanished without a trace, no foundation, no debris, not even a depression in the soil to indicate something had once stood there. The federal agents were gone too, leaving no contact information, no explanation. Only Detective Mercer's case notes and a single newspaper clipping the obituary remained as evidence that anything unusual had occurred at all. The case of the house that wasn't on any maps remains officially unresolved. The disappearance of Martin Crowell is still listed as an open investigation. Sometimes, on particularly quiet nights, Detective Mercer drives to Lot 157 and parks across the street. She watches the empty space through her windshield, waiting, though she isn't sure what for. And sometimes, when the fog rolls in just right, she thinks she can see the faint outline of a Victorian house, a wisp of smoke curling from a chimney that isn't there. The development project for Lot 157 was quietly canceled. The land remains empty to this day. Story 5, she had never seen him before, just a man standing on the opposite sidewalk watching her. When she finally confronted him, he smiled. "I used to live in your house," he said. "I had your bedroom." She was about to ask more, but he cut her off with a whisper, "Check under the floorboards." The words lingered in the October air as Catherine Matthews stood frozen on Maple Street. The man, mid-50s, unremarkable gray coat, thinning hair, turned and walked away, his footsteps creating a steady rhythm against the concrete. She watched until he disappeared around the corner, then glanced back at her Victorian home, its windows reflecting the afternoon sun like knowing eyes. Detective James Mercer set his coffee mug down carefully, the ceramic making a soft clink against the wooden desk. The precinct hummed with quiet activity, keyboards clicking, phones ringing in the distance, the occasional murmur of conversation. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows, creating a soothing backdrop to Catherine's account. "And you've lived in the house for how long?" Mercer asked, his voice low and measured as he wrote in his notepad. The pen made soft, scratching sounds against the paper. 3 years this December, Catherine replied, her fingers tracing the edge of her scarf. I've renovated most of it, but the original hardwood floors were too beautiful to replace. Mercer nodded, his eyes moving from his notes to Catherine's face. 20 years on the force had taught him to notice the small details, the slight tremor in her hands, the way she kept glancing toward the door as if expecting the stranger to appear. The house on 1421 Maple Street had a history that stretched back to 1897. Detective Mercer scrolled through property records, the blue light of his computer screen illuminating his face in the dimly lit office. Previous owners scrolled past, the Matthewses, the Johnsons, the Pierces, the Caldwells. He paused, leaning closer. The Caldwells had owned the house from 1978 to 1992. Thomas and Marie Caldwell with their son, Robert. Robert Caldwell, the name sat heavy in the room as Mercer typed it into the database. Results appeared slowly, one by one. Robert Caldwell, age 54, no criminal record, current address 732 Westlake Avenue, just 20 minutes from Maple Street. And then a news article from 1992. Local family sells home following daughter's disappearance. Mercer's finger hovered over the headline. The Caldwells had a daughter, Emma, who vanished in 1992. She was 16. The case was never solved. The next morning brought weak sunlight filtering through Catherine's kitchen windows. She hadn't slept, her mind replaying the stranger's words, check under the floorboards. The house creaked around her, familiar sounds now carrying new meaning. She placed her coffee cup on the counter and walked slowly to her bedroom. The hardwood floors were original oak, polished to a warm honey glow. Catherine ran her hand along the planks, feeling every groove and seam. Near the window, one board seemed slightly different, the grain pattern interrupted, the edges worn in a different way. Her fingers found a small indentation, just enough to get a grip. Detective Mercer's phone rang at 9:17 a.m. Catherine's voice came through, unsteady and distant. I found something. The small metal box rested on Catherine's dining room table, covered in a fine layer of dust. Detective Mercer pulled on latex gloves, the material making a soft snapping sound. The lock was simple, corroded with time, and broke easily with gentle pressure. Inside lay a diary, its pages yellowed and brittle, and a silver bracelet with a heart-shaped charm. Engraved on the heart was a single name, Emma. The diary belonged to Emma Caldwell. The entries started on her 14th birthday and continued until 3 days before her disappearance. The final entry described a growing fear of someone watching her, following her home from school. He thinks I don't notice, but I do, she had written. Sometimes I hear the floorboards creak outside my room at night. Robert Caldwell watched from his apartment window as the police car pulled up. He had been waiting for this moment for 30 years. When Detective Mercer knocked, Robert opened the door immediately. "You found her diary," he said simply. It wasn't a question. In the interrogation room, the fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. Robert Caldwell sat with perfect posture, his hands folded on the table. "I didn't kill my sister," he said, his voice steady, "but I know who did." Robert's story unfolded like a photograph slowly developing. Their father, Thomas Caldwell, respected accountant and family man, had a different side at home. Emma had threatened to expose him, to tell people about the rage, the control, the fear that filled their house. "The night she disappeared, I heard them arguing," Robert continued, his eyes fixed on some distant point. "The next morning she was gone. My father said she had run away. 2 weeks later he sold the house. We moved across town. No one ever asked too many questions." Thomas Caldwell had died 5 years ago, a heart attack in his sleep. He had taken his secrets to the grave, or so he thought. "I've driven by that house every week for years," Robert said, his composure finally breaking. "Wondering if she was still there under those floors. I couldn't go in, I couldn't face it. But when I saw you," he looked at Catherine, who had joined them at the station, "you reminded me so much of her. I thought maybe it was a sign." 3 days later, forensic teams carefully removed sections of the hardwood floor in Catherine's bedroom. 6 feet down, beneath layers of soil and stone, they found nothing. The space beneath the house yielded no secrets, no remains, no answers. Emma Caldwell's case remained officially unsolved, another name in a file of missing persons who never came home. But her diary, her words, finally told part of her story. The investigation into Thomas Caldwell began, cold but determined, reaching back through decades of silence. Catherine eventually returned to her house on Maple Street. She had the floors replaced, donated the house's proceeds to a missing persons foundation, and moved to an apartment downtown. Sometimes, when passing her old street, she would see Robert Caldwell standing on the sidewalk looking up at the house. Two people connected by a space, by a story without an ending, by a truth partially revealed but never fully uncovered. The stranger who knew her name had brought a 30-year-old secret into the light. And somewhere, perhaps, Emma Caldwell's story continued, waiting for its final page to be written. Story 6. The Desert Palm Motel stood alone on Highway 16, its neon sign flickering weakly against the vast darkness of the Nevada desert. Room 113 was like any other in the aging establishment: faded wallpaper, a sagging queen bed, and a television set that looked like it had been manufactured sometime during the Clinton administration. Detective Simmons traced his finger along the dusty surface of the TV stand as he listened to the recording. The woman's voice was calm at first, then increasingly distressed as she described what had happened 3 nights ago. The motel was cheap, nothing fancy, she had told the 911 operator. I flipped through the TV channels, static filling most of them except one. The screen showed a live feed of my own room. Confused, I turned the TV off. It turned itself back on. The recording continued playing softly in the empty room as Simmons studied the television. It was an old model, the kind with manual dials and a bulky back. Nothing special about it. Nothing to suggest how it could have shown what the woman Elaine Mercer, 34, traveling salesperson, claimed it had shown. I saw myself sitting on the bed, her voice continued from the recorder. But when I moved my hand, the image on screen moved a half second before I did, like it was predicting my movements. The officer who had taken the initial report had dismissed it as confusion, exhaustion, or perhaps too much roadside diner coffee. But then Elaine Mercer had disappeared, leaving behind her luggage, her rental car keys, and a room that showed no signs of struggle or forced entry. Simmons looked up at the ceiling corner where a small, innocuous smoke detector was mounted. He had already checked its standard issue, no hidden cameras. The motel manager, a man with perpetually damp palms and darting eyes, had sworn there were no surveillance systems in the rooms. Privacy is what keeps folks coming back, he had insisted, though the layer of dust on every surface suggested few came back at all. The detective ran his hands along the back of the television, feeling for anything unusual. The plastic casing was warm, despite the TV being unplugged since the forensics team had finished their work hours earlier. Outside, the desert wind whispered against the windows. Inside, the tape continued. "It's showing me leaving the room now." Elaine's voice had grown quieter. "But I'm still here. I'm still sitting on the bed watching the TV. The me on the screen is walking to the door, opening it." Simmons felt a chill despite the room's warmth. He had investigated hundreds of disappearances over his 23-year career. Most had logical explanations. People ran from debts, from relationships, from themselves. But occasionally there were cases like this, cases that settled into the space between his shoulder blades like a cold finger. He checked his notes again. 3 other guests had disappeared from the desert palm in the past 18 months. Each had been alone. Each had been staying in room 113. Each disappearance had been attributed to the transient nature of the motel's clientele, people passing through, moving on without notice. But none of the other missing guests had left behind a 911 call. "It's standing outside now." Elaine's voice had dropped to a whisper. "The me on the TV, it's standing in the parking lot looking back at the window, but I'm still here. I'm still." A pause, then the TV just changed. "It's showing the inside of a car now, my rental. The keys are on the dresser, but on the screen they're in the ignition." Simmons walked to the window and looked out at the parking space where Elaine's rental had been found, keys still on the dresser as she had said. The lot was empty now except for his own unmarked sedan, its surface already gathering the fine desert dust that seemed to coat everything here. The recorded voice grew more urgent. "It's driving now. The TV is showing the road, the highway, but it's not me driving. I'm still here." Another pause, longer this time. "Wait, the picture is changing again. It's showing a desert, just empty desert. There's something there in the distance, a shape. The camera is moving toward it." The recording fell silent for several seconds. When Elaine spoke again, her voice had changed, flattened somehow. All the anxiety drained away. "I understand now. I know where I need to go." The final sound on the recording was the soft click of a door closing. Simmons switched off the recorder and sat on the edge of the bed. The television screen remained dark, reflecting his tired face back at him. He had called for backup, but the nearest available unit was 40 minutes away. Protocol said to wait, but something about the room felt increasingly oppressive, as if the walls were listening. He reached for the TV power cord, intending to plug it back in to see for himself what channels might come through. His hand paused mid-action as doubt crept in. Was professional curiosity worth the risk, given what he had just heard? The decision was made for him when the television flickered to life on its own, despite remaining unplugged. The screen filled with static before clearing to show a single, sharp image. Detective Simmons, sitting on the bed, looking at himself on the screen, his hand frozen in midair. On the television, his reflection smiled slightly and stood up. Simmons remained seated, watching as his on-screen self walked to the door, opened it, and stepped outside into the Nevada night. The screen changed, the inside of his car, the desert highway, the empty landscape with a distant shape emerging from the darkness. And Detective Simmons understood where he needed to go. In the morning, when backup finally arrived, they found room 113 empty, the bed still made, a recorder on the nightstand, and an unplugged television that, no matter how many times they tried, would show nothing but static. Story 7, the dash cam had been installed for safety just in case. One night, the driver reviewed the footage from his last shift. The camera clearly showed him driving alone, but in the rearview mirror, there was a passenger sitting in the back seat. Derek Mason had been driving for the rideshare company Lunar for just under 7 months. The job suited his nocturnal tendencies, the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, when the streets of Portland transformed into empty arteries, punctuated only by the occasional glow of traffic lights changing for no one. The rhythm of the night shift had become a comfort to him. The soft purr of his sedan's engine, the blue-tinged dashboard lights, and the gentle voice of the GPS guiding him through the sleeping city. On that particular Wednesday in November, the rain had been falling steadily since sunset, creating a constant white noise against the roof of his vehicle. The streets glistened under the street lamps, their light fragmenting into countless golden reflections on the wet asphalt. It had been a slow night, a few airport pickups, a couple of late-night workers heading home, and the occasional group of friends leaving bars that were closing for the night. Derek finished his shift at 4:17 a.m., according to the automatic log in his app. He drove home to his one-bedroom apartment in the Southeast District, the windshield wipers keeping time with the low jazz playing on the radio. He remembered feeling unusually tired that morning. Perhaps it was the weather, the hypnotic pattern of rain against glass lulling him towards sleep even as he drove. It wasn't until the following evening, as he prepared for another shift, that Derek decided to review the previous night's dashcam footage. He had developed this habit after a passenger had once disputed a fare, claiming a route that was longer than necessary. The camera had proven him right on that occasion, and since then he'd taken to scanning through the recordings occasionally just to be safe. The footage began normally, the interior of his car illuminated by the soft blue glow from his console, his face partially visible as he checked his mirrors and adjusted his seat. The timestamp read 11:58 p.m., the beginning of his shift. Derek fast-forwarded through the uneventful stretches between passengers, stopping occasionally to ensure the recording was functioning properly. At 2:34 a.m., something caught his attention. He had just dropped off a young woman at a high-rise apartment building in the Pearl District. The footage showed him pulling away from the curb, checking his mirror's standard procedure. But as the car accelerated, the rearview mirror captured something that made Derek's finger freeze over the pause button. There in the back seat was the silhouette of a person. Detective Elaine Harmon received the report on Friday morning. It was flagged as low priority. No crime had been committed after all, just a concerned citizen with unusual footage. Still, something about the description intrigued her enough to call Derek and ask him to come in. Perhaps it was the specificity of his account or the genuine confusion in his voice when he described what he had seen. "I was alone in the car," Derek explained, his voice steady but his fingers restlessly tracing the edge of the coffee cup the detective had offered him. The interview room was small but comfortable, deliberately so. Detective Harmon had chosen this space rather than the more intimidating formal interrogation rooms. "The dashcam shows the front seat and part of the back through the rearview mirror," he continued. "I can see myself clearly, driving, checking my phone for the next pickup, but in the mirror, there's someone sitting in the back seat, just sitting there, not moving much." Detective Harmon nodded, her expression neutral. "And you have no memory of a passenger at that time?" "None," Derek shook his head. "I checked my app history. My last ride ended at 2:32 a.m. The next one didn't start until 3:05. There should have been no one in my car during that gap." The footage itself was unremarkable at first glance. The quality was decent, better than most commercial dash cams. The interior of the sedan was visible, illuminated by the ambient glow of streetlights and the blue dashboard display. Derek could be seen clearly, occasionally checking his phone, adjusting the radio, scanning the road ahead. But the rear-view mirror, positioned at the top center of the windshield, reflected something difficult to explain. A figure sat in the middle of the back seat, not clearly defined, but unmistakably person-shaped. The lighting made it impossible to discern features, just a darker shadow against the gray upholstery. "Did you notice anything unusual during your shift?" Detective Harmon asked, her pen hovering over her notepad. "Cold spots, strange sounds, any mechanical issues with the car?" Derek thought for a moment, his eyes drifting to the middle distance as he mentally retraced his route. Nothing out of the ordinary. The rain was heavy at times. The roads were slick, but the car ran fine and I didn't sense anyone with me. The technical department analyzed the footage over the weekend. Their report, delivered to Detective Harmon on Monday morning, was simultaneously clarifying and mystifying. There were no signs of tampering with the video file. The timestamp was accurate, matching the metadata and the rideshare company's logs. The image was not the result of a reflection or a technical glitch in the camera. According to their analysis, there appeared to be a person in Derek's back seat during a 27-minute period when the vehicle should have been empty. Detective Harmon took the unusual step of researching the route Derek had driven during those 27 minutes. It led from the Pearl District along the river, then across the Hawthorne Bridge and into the industrial area near the train yards. A route that would make little sense for a rideshare driver between fares, but Derek insisted that was where the app had directed him for his next pickup. "I remember waiting at the location for about 5 minutes," Derek said during their follow-up interview. "The passenger never showed up, so the app marked it as a no-show and assigned me somewhere else." The detective checked the address, an abandoned warehouse that had once been part of a paper mill. No residential buildings within half a mile, no bars or restaurants. No reason anyone would request a ride from there at 3 a.m. When she questioned the rideshare company, they had no record of such a request in their system. 3 days later, Detective Harmon received a message from the department's archival researcher. A year earlier, almost to the day, a rideshare driver had been reported missing after dropping off a passenger in the Pearl District. His car was found the next morning, parked near the old paper mill. The driver, Michael Collins, was never located. The case had gone cold after weeks without leads. No evidence of foul play had been found in the vehicle. The prevailing theory was that Collins had abandoned his life for reasons unknown, the timing coinciding with a pending divorce and financial difficulties. Detective Harmon requested the file photos from Collins' abandoned vehicle. The make and model matched Derek's, a common sedan favored by many rideshare drivers, but one detail caused her breath to catch. On the back seat of Collins' car, investigators had found a single black glove. In the grainy dashcam footage from Derek's car, though difficult to discern clearly, the figure in the back seat appeared to be missing its right hand. The department determined there was insufficient evidence to reopen the Collins case. No crime had been committed against Derek Mason. The footage, while unusual, did not constitute proof of anything actionable. Derek continued driving for the rideshare company, though he switched to day shifts. He replaced his dashcam with a model that offered better night vision capabilities and wider coverage of the vehicle's interior. He avoided the Pearl District and never accepted rides that would take him across the Hawthorne Bridge after dark. Detective Harmon occasionally reviewed the Collins file during quiet moments at her desk. Sometimes, late at night, she would watch Derek's footage again, studying the shadowy figure in the back seat, wondering what message it might have been trying to convey and to whom. The dash cam had been installed for safety just in case, but some things remain beyond the lens of certainty, visible only in glimpses, in reflections, in the spaces between what we see and what we know to be true. Story 8, it was a stupid joke. The couple moved into an old home, and for fun, the husband called out, "Hello." The walls were thick, the house was silent. But a second later, from deep in the hallway, a voice whispered back, "Come in." The Darlington house stood at the end of Willow Street for over a century, its Victorian facade weathered by time, its windows reflecting generations of lives lived within its walls. In October of 2018, Mark and Sarah Lawson purchased the property at a price that seemed too good to be true. The real estate agent had mentioned its storied past with a practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. On their first night, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and the unfamiliar creaks of settling wood, Mark had called out into the darkness of the long hallway. Neither of them expected an answer. The whispered response, soft yet unmistakable, sent them back to their hotel that night, leaving their possessions behind in what would become the first piece of evidence in Detective James Harmon's most disturbing case. The detective's leather shoes made barely a sound on the polished hardwood as he walked through the empty house 3 days later. The morning light filtered through dusty curtains, casting long shadows across walls that seemed to absorb sound. In his 23 years with the department, Harmon had developed what colleagues called a sixth sense, an ability to feel the wrongness of a scene before evidence revealed it. The couple reported hearing a voice, Officer Mendez said, her voice unnaturally loud in the quiet space. But the house was completely empty when they checked, all doors locked, all windows sealed. Harmon nodded, running his fingers along the ornate banister of the main staircase. The wood felt cool beneath his touch, almost too cool for the mild autumn day. "Previous owners?" he asked, his voice low and measured. "That's where it gets interesting," Mendez replied, flipping through her notes. The pages made a soft, rhythmic sound as she turned them. "The house has been empty for 7 years. The last owners, the Petersons, left suddenly. Neighbors say they departed in the middle of the night, left everything behind." Something about this detail made Harmon pause at the foot of the stairs. The silence seemed to deepen around them, as if the house itself were listening. The investigation began with standard procedures, background checks on previous owners, interviews with neighbors, examination of the property. Detective Harmon spent hours in the county records office, the yellow light of the reading lamps casting shadows across documents that smelled of dust and secrets. His fingertips grew gray from the old paper as he traced the house's history back through the decades. What emerged was a pattern so subtle that it would have been easy to dismiss as coincidence. Since its construction in 1892, the Darlington house had seen 17 different owners. 12 had left unexpectedly, often in the night, abandoning possessions and breaking leases. 5 had disappeared entirely, their cases still open in yellowing files tucked away in the department's basement archives. "There's something about this place," Harmon confided to his partner over coffee a week into the investigation. The diner's ambient noise, clinking silverware, murmured conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine provided a comforting barrier against the silence he'd grown to dread in the Darlington house. "Every time I'm there, I feel like I'm being watched." His partner, Detective Rivera, had seen enough in her career to neither dismiss nor indulge such feelings. "What does the structural report say?" she asked instead, practical as always. The report, compiled by engineers who had spent 2 days examining every inch of the house, had found nothing unusual, no hidden rooms, no structural anomalies that could explain acoustic tricks. What they did find, however, was a peculiarity in the central hallway's design. The curved walls created what the lead engineer described as a perfect acoustic chamber, where sounds could travel in unexpected ways. It was during his 7th visit to the property that Harmon made the discovery. Alone in the house as evening approached, he had been standing in the upstairs study when he noticed a slight discoloration on one wall. The paint, a faded blue, seemed darker in a rectangular shape about the size of a doorway. When he pressed his hand against it, he felt the slightest give not enough to be noticeable unless you were looking for it. The hidden room beyond contained only a single item, a journal bound in cracked leather, its pages brittle with age. The handwriting inside belonged to Edward Darlington, the original owner and architect of the house. The first entry was dated April 17, 1892. "Today I completed what will be my finest achievement," the spidery handwriting read. "A house that lives, that breathes, that speaks. The acoustics are perfect, sound travels through the chambers like blood through veins, and something more, something I had not anticipated. When I call out, sometimes the house answers." The journal detailed Darlington's descent from pride to fear as the phenomenon continued. What began as echoes evolved into whispers, then into full sentences. By the final entry, dated November 3, 1893, Darlington wrote of conversations of giving the house what it asked for. That entry ended mid-sentence. Edward Darlington was reported missing on November 4, 1893. His body was never found. As Detective Harmon closed the journal, the fading daylight cast his shadow long across the hidden room's floor. The silence of the house pressed in around him, expectant and heavy. Without conscious thought, he found himself whispering, "Is anyone here?" The answer came not as a voice, but as a sudden drop in temperature so severe that his breath clouded in front of him. The door to the hidden room swung shut with a soft click. He reached for his flashlight only to find it dead, leaving him in perfect darkness. When Officer Mendez found him 3 hours later, Detective Harmon was sitting on the floor of the study, the journal open beside him, his face drained of color. He never explained what happened in that hidden room, and he never returned to the Darlington house. The investigation was officially closed 2 weeks later, the report citing inconclusive evidence of criminal activity. The Lawsons never reclaimed their possessions. The house remained empty, its windows dark, its for sale signs slowly weathering in the front yard. Yet sometimes residents of Willow Street report hearing voices from the empty house, conversations between unseen speakers. And occasionally, late at night, a light can be seen moving from room to room, as if someone is searching for something or someone that was lost long ago. The Darlington house still stands today, silent and waiting for someone new to call out a greeting. And in the stillness of its halls, it waits to answer. Story 9, the hallway of the Westmore apartment complex was always quiet after sunset. A soft yellow glow from outdated fixtures cast long shadows across the faded floral wallpaper, creating an almost sepia-toned photograph of suburban anonymity. The carpet, once vibrant burgundy, had been worn to a muted rust by thousands of footsteps over the decades. This was a place where people lived their separate lives behind identical doors, rarely intersecting except for the occasional nod in the stairwell or a mumbled good morning while collecting mail. Everyone in the apartment complex knew about apartment 309. The rent was paid, but no one ever saw the tenant. No mail, no visitors. Then one night, a resident noticed something strange. The door was slightly open. When he pushed it open, the apartment was completely empty. No furniture, no signs of anyone ever living there. Just a single chair facing the doorway, as if someone had been waiting. Detective Sarah Mercer arrived at the Westmore on a Tuesday morning. The gentle patter of rain against the building's old windows created a soothing rhythm that belied the unusual circumstances that had brought her there. Her sensible shoes made almost no sound as she approached the third floor, notepad in hand, her breath visible in the poorly heated hallway. "How long has the apartment been empty?" she asked the property manager, a heavy-set man named Morris who perpetually smelled of cigarettes and coffee. His keyring jingled softly as he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "That's the thing, detective," he said, his voice low and measured. "According to our records, it shouldn't be empty at all." Morris flipped through his ledger, the pages making a soft whisper as they turned. "The rent for 309 has been paid on time every month for the past 14 years. Never late, never a problem. Electronic transfer from a bank account registered to a James Wilson." Detective Mercer ran her fingers along the door frame, feeling the smooth wood grain beneath her fingertips. No scratches around the lock, no signs of forced entry. The door had simply been opened. "And no one has ever seen this James Wilson?" she asked, already knowing the answer. Morris shook his head slowly. "Never. Lease was signed via mail. Back then, we didn't require in-person meetings. The deposit was substantial enough that the owner didn't ask questions." Inside the apartment, the hardwood floors gleamed with a dull sheen, perfectly preserved without the scuffs and marks that daily life would leave behind. The walls were pristine off-white, without a single nail hole or picture hanger. The emptiness felt deliberate, as if the space had been purposefully maintained in a state of perpetual readiness. Except for that single wooden chair. It sat precisely in the center of the living room, facing the entrance. A simple, unadorned piece of furniture that somehow felt more unsettling than if the detective had found signs of struggle or violence. Detective Mercer circled the chair slowly, her notebook forgotten in her hand. The chair wasn't dusty. It looked recently wiped clean, its wood polished to a soft glow that caught the light filtering through the bare windows. The resident who found the door open, Thomas Reeves from 311, said he knocked first, Morris explained, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might disturb something in the empty space. He'd never seen anyone come or go, but sometimes, late at night, he thought he heard movements, nothing specific, just a sense that someone was there. Detective Mercer crouched down to examine the floor beneath the chair. No marks, no scuffs. It was as if the chair had been placed there without ever being moved, without ever being sat in. "We need to find out more about this James Wilson," she said, rising slowly to her feet. "Bank records, background check, anything." 3 days later, in the quiet of her office, Detective Mercer stared at a thin file folder. The rain continued its gentle percussion against her window, providing a soundtrack to her mounting confusion. James Wilson didn't exist, at least not the James Wilson who had rented apartment 309. The bank account making the payments was opened 14 years ago with proper identification that, upon further investigation, belonged to a man who had died 17 years earlier. No one had claimed his identity. The social security number had simply been borrowed. Detective Mercer sipped her cooling coffee, the ceramic mug warm against her palms. The security cameras in the Westmore's lobby had been installed only 5 years ago and showed no one ever entering or leaving apartment 309 during that time. She spread photographs across her desk, the empty apartment, the chair, close-ups of the pristine floors and walls. Something about the chair kept drawing her attention. It wasn't just facing the door, it was positioned exactly where someone would sit to watch the entrance, to watch for someone coming in. Or to wait for someone. A week into the investigation, Detective Mercer received a call from Morris. His voice trembled slightly over the line. "The chair is gone," he said simply. Mercer felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn weather. "What do you mean, gone? Did someone remove it?" "No one entered the apartment. We changed the locks after you were here, and I have the only key. The door was still locked when I checked this morning, but the chair, it's just not there anymore." That afternoon, as Detective Mercer stood once again in the empty apartment, she felt as though the walls were watching her. The space that had once held the chair now appeared as pristine as the rest of the hardwood floor, no marks, no indication that anything had ever been there. The electronic payment for apartment 309's rent stopped that month. The automatic transfer that had faithfully delivered funds for 14 years simply ceased without explanation. Detective Mercer eventually filed her report, listing the case as an unusual but non-criminal occurrence. There was no evidence of any crime having been committed, no victim, no perpetrator, no missing person, only an empty apartment and a chair that was there and then wasn't. Sometimes late at night, Sarah Mercer would find herself thinking about apartment 309, about the person who paid rent for 14 years but never lived there, about the chair positioned just so, as if in wait. And she would wonder with a subtle unease that settled into her bones, who or what had finally arrived. Story 10. The old Polaroid held secrets within its faded frame, memories frozen in time. Sarah Winters uncovered it in a box labeled Memories, tucked away in her mother's attic. Each photograph chronicled family gatherings, capturing smiles and flickering candles. But as Sarah sifted through the snapshots, a chill crept over her. There, in the background of every image, lurked a mysterious figure. A man, shrouded in shadow, stood just beyond the glow of the candles. He didn't belong to the family captured in the photos, yet he drew closer with each passing picture. Cleaning out the attic after her mother's funeral, Sarah stumbled upon the unsettling collection. What should have been a comforting journey through happier times turned into the beginning of a haunting mystery. In the first photo, the shadowy figure was barely noticeable, a mere silhouette at the edge of the frame during Sarah's 7th birthday party. As the series progressed, he insidiously moved closer, lingering just behind unsuspecting family members. Disturbed by the discovery, Sarah reached out to her father, his voice faltering at the mention of the mysterious man. Despite his disbelief, Sarah sent digital copies of the Polaroids, hoping for answers. Her father's shaken response only deepened the mystery. Determined to unravel the enigma, Sarah sought the help of Detective Marcus Reed. In the dimly lit precinct, rain tapping against the windows, Sarah laid out the photos before the detective. Shadows danced across the evidence as Reed studied the progression of the figure's movements through the family gatherings. Each image revealed the man's calculated approach, inching closer to the children, including a young Sarah herself. The detective's curiosity piqued, recognizing the deliberate nature of the shadow's presence. As Reed delved into the investigation, contacting those who had attended the parties, a grim realization took hold. No one remembered the mysterious man. No logical explanation could account for his presence in the secluded settings captured in the photographs. Facial recognition software proved futile, as the figure remained elusive, strategically hidden in each frame. The breakthrough came with the aid of a computer specialist, enhancing the images to reveal telling details: a scar, a ring, a faint reflection. Dental records ultimately unmasked the shadowy figure as Robert Keller, a vanished maintenance worker linked to unsolved child abductions from decades past. Keller's connection to the rental properties where the family gatherings took place sent shivers down Sarah's spine. Deepening the horror, subsequent photos from other family albums unveiled Keller's presence at various events over the years, always lurking in the background, unnoticed until now. The pieces fell into place, connecting Keller to long cold cases of missing children, his sinister trail stretching across time and space. Authorities unearthed chilling evidence buried beneath Keller's former residence, linking him to the disappearances that had haunted families for years. The revelation of the hidden horrors left Sarah reeling, grappling with the realization that her past was intertwined with a dark chapter of unspeakable crimes. Alone in her apartment, surrounded by the damning photographs, Sarah contemplated the weight of the truth that had come to light. The candles in the final birthday photo cast a bittersweet glow on her family's faces, forever frozen in time. And there, behind her younger self, stood the figure of Robert Keller, a specter of malevolence silently observing. The closure brought by the investigation offered answers long sought by grieving families, but the cost of uncovering the hidden figure in the photos was steep. The shadow that had haunted celebrations for decades had finally been exposed to the light of justice, his presence no longer concealed in the shadows of forgotten memories. As Sarah placed the photos back in the box, they bore witness to the chilling truth that some threats linger unseen, moving through life's moments undetected, leaving behind only a ghostly imprint in the annals of time. Story 11. The gentle current whispered its lullaby that morning, caressing the glassy, still water as the fisherman cast his gaze upon the tranquil scene. A solitary suitcase caught his eye, bobbing near the shoreline, almost blending into the peaceful surroundings. At first glance, he mistook it for discarded clothes, a mere cast-off of little consequence. But as he drew nearer, a pungent stench assaulted his senses, thick, suffocating, impossible to ignore. The suitcase was encased in chains, weather-worn and rusted from exposure to the elements. When the authorities pried it open, the contents revealed a chilling truth. Not garments, but a tangle of hair, fingers frozen in a macabre grip, and nestled at the bottom, a haunting note: "This isn't the first." Detective Sarah Mercer stood on the murky shore, a handkerchief pressed delicately to her nose, her gaze somber as it swept over the grim discovery before her. The victim, a woman in her mid-30s with dark tresses and now pallid skin marred by the touch of water, lay before them. The medical examiner painstakingly documented every detail, a somber ritual before the body would be taken away. What struck Mercer amidst the horror was not just the manner of disposal, but the eerie care with which the victim had been prepared: manicured nails, freshly styled hair, adorned in expensive attire. She wasn't brought here to perish, Mercer remarked quietly, her eyes fixed on the gentle lap of the water against the shoreline's edge. She was ready, displayed. The victim was identified as Catherine Walsh, a successful real estate agent renowned for her expertise in selling luxurious properties. Divorced, childless, residing alone in an affluent neighborhood, she was known to be ambitious, meticulous, and fiercely private. Her sudden disappearance had raised alarm, particularly among her colleagues, who described her as dedicated and unwavering in her commitments. Her assistant, the one who had reported her missing upon her absence from a crucial showing to esteemed clients, spoke fervently of her dedication to her work, emphasizing the gravity of the missed opportunity, a potential windfall in commissions. As investigators delved into Walsh's meticulously curated life, they found her home a portrait of perfection. Every corner pristine, every piece of designer furniture meticulously arranged. Not a speck of dust dared to settle on any surface. Meals in the refrigerator were organized by day, each in identical containers, meticulously labeled. Her closet revealed a rainbow of garments, shoes carefully protected in their bags. Yet a single anomaly stood out in her meticulously ordered world, a slightly ajar drawer in her home office. Within, a leather-bound journal lay hidden. The final entry sent shivers down Mercer's spine. He's watching again. Same car, different plates. A digital exploration of Walsh's online footprint unveiled a series of unsettling emails from unknown senders, all bearing the eerie message, "I see your perfection." Each message dispatched at precisely the same time on disparate days. Her browsing history hinted at a growing unease, with searches for security systems and personal defense mechanisms peppered throughout. Mercer pieced together these fragments of a life interrupted, of a soul haunted, with the precision of a seasoned detective. "Our perpetrator is not driven by rage," Mercer confided to her partner. "This is calculated, this is ritualistic." The break in the case arrived unexpectedly, a beacon of clarity amidst the murky depths of tragedy. A local pawnshop proprietor recognized a distinctive emerald necklace, absent from Walsh's effects. The one who had pawned it was a familiar face, Michael Linden, an unassuming maintenance worker with a penchant for blending into the background. Surveillance footage captured Linden's frequent visits to Walsh's building, sometimes wheeling his maintenance cart, other times slipping in unnoticed. Always during hours when she would be occupied with her real estate showings. A search of Linden's modest abode unveiled a chilling mosaic of obsession. Photographs of Walsh and other women adorned his walls, each bearing a striking resemblance to the victims, each captured without their knowledge. Some images were cruelly defaced with a slash of red. Walsh stood as the third in this twisted gallery. A hidden compartment in his closet unveiled a shrine of macabre devotion. Personal effects of each victim meticulously arranged, a lock of hair, stained tissues, mementos of lives extinguished. A small notebook for each, a meticulous catalog of their daily routines, preferences, quirks. When Linden was brought into the stark interrogation room, his demeanor remained eerily composed. His appearance neat, his voice soft-spoken, he exuded an unsettling calm. Confronted with the evidence laid bare before him, he finally spoke, devoid of emotion. "They were flawed," he uttered flatly. "They masqueraded as flawless, but I saw through their facade. Catherine's desk was always in disarray. She missed a spot with her lipstick. Her perfection was a charade." The search for the first two victims alluded to in his cryptic note led investigators to desolate locations where two more suitcases surfaced. Each harbored women akin to Walsh, real estate agents who prided themselves on their meticulous attention to detail, their facade of flawlessness shattered in death. As Lyndon sat motionless through his trial, a tableau of detached indifference, the families of the victims bore witness to justice being served. A lifetime imprisonment without hope of release awaited him, a fitting retribution for the lives he had torn asunder. And yet, for Detective Mercer, the closure of the case left a lingering ache of unanswered questions. What inner imperfection had driven Lyndon to fixate on these particular women? What shadows lurked in the recesses of his mind, compelling him to seek out and extinguish perceived flaws in others? The river continued its tranquil voyage downstream, its waters slowly erasing all traces of the gruesome tale that had unfolded along its banks. But in the precinct atop Mercer's desk lay copies of those haunting notebooks, a silent testament to the darkness that can fester behind closed doors within seemingly ordinary lives. For sometimes the most perilous predators are those who walk among us, concealed in plain sight, their eyes keenly attuned to the slightest imperfection, waiting for that fatal flaw to betray their true nature. Story 12, the aged apartment exuded a sense of history, its walls holding secrets whispered through time. The heating system let out a low, mournful groan, the pipes rattling like bones in the night, a symphony of the past, a melody of forgotten echoes. It was a familiar chorus, one that blended into the background of everyday life, or so she thought, until the night she heard it. A voice, ethereal and delicate, drifted through the vents like a ghostly whisper. It wasn't the usual hum of distant conversations or the creaking of old floorboards. This voice was different. It was calling her name. Intrigued and unnerved, she pressed her ear against the cold metal grate, her heart quickening its beat. A chill brushed her cheek, a gentle caress of unseen fingers, followed by the soft, almost playful words, "I know you can hear me." Detective Morgan Shaw stood in the heart of the vacant apartment, a still figure amidst the flurry of activity as the forensics team meticulously combed through the scene. The rusted vent cover, forcibly removed from its place, beckoned her attention. The victim, Alina Reeves, had vanished without a trace, her absence unnoticed until the scent of decay permeated the building. What they uncovered within the ventilation system defied logic and reason. Reports of voices through the vents, Officer Patel recited from his notes, his voice a somber undertone in the eerie silence of the room, dismissed as mere quirks of an old building's infrastructure. Shaw knelt by the vent, her keen eyes tracing the desperate marks etched around its edges. These were not the marks of tools, but of frantic hands, clawing in a desperate bid for escape from the inside. Alina Reeves, a beloved kindergarten teacher, a soul cherished by many, had succumbed to a fate shrouded in mystery. Her apartment told a tale of paranoia and fear, of a presence unseen but deeply felt. The investigation unveiled unsettling truths. Fibers entwined in the vent grating matched those of Alina's favorite cardigan. A foreign fingerprint, not belonging to the victim, lingered on the inside of the vent cover. Yet most chilling were the recordings retrieved from Alina's phone, a haunting dialogue between her and an unseen entity, a voice from the shadows. As Shaw delved deeper into the building's history, a pattern emerged, a sinister pattern woven through the lives of past tenants who had fled, their minds haunted by spectral whispers and unseen eyes. Harold Weber, the enigmatic building superintendent, held keys to every door, every shadowed corner. His facade of indifference cracked under Shaw's scrutiny, revealing a glimpse of a dark truth he sought to conceal. The discovery of a hidden passage within Alina's bathroom, leading to a labyrinth of maintenance shafts and vents, unearthed a chilling revelation. Someone had been lurking within the walls, a phantom observer, a sinister presence that whispered in the darkness. Weber's meticulously organized files, his digital shrine of voyeurism, painted a disturbing picture of obsession and possession. His calm demeanor belied the madness that lurked within, a madness that found solace in the hidden recesses of the building's structure. The trial laid bare the depths of Weber's depravity, his twisted belief in a communion with the building itself. The verdict echoed through the courtroom, a resounding condemnation of his crimes, his voice forever silenced, but his whispers lingering in the walls. The apartment building, now a hollow shell, stood as a testament to the horrors that had unfolded within its walls. Despite attempts at renewal, at exorcising the ghosts of the past, the whispers endured. Residents spoke of eerie sounds, of voices carried on the frigid drafts that wove through the vents. The building groaned, the pipes rattled. It was nothing out of the ordinary, or so they tried to convince themselves. The mysteries of the old apartment lingered, a lullaby of the night, a tale to be whispered in the shadows, a story that echoed through the walls of time. Story 13. In the grand Victorian-era home of Michael and Sarah Klein, a mysterious tale began to unfold. The couple, drawn to the house's old-world charm, had no intention of renovating right away. But when a water stain appeared on the bedroom wall, curiosity took hold. As they peeled back layers of wallpaper, a haunting discovery awaited them. Written in ink, the name Alina Winters repeated endlessly, the script growing more frantic with each iteration. Sarah's soft voice broke the silence as she traced the name with trembling fingers, questioning the identity of Alina Winters. The search for answers led them down a rabbit hole of forgotten history. Online searches yielded only one result, a missing persons case from decades past, featuring a woman who bore an uncanny resemblance to the previous homeowner, Margaret Cavendish. The unsettling revelation propelled Michael and Sarah into a relentless pursuit of the truth. Late nights were spent poring over property records and old newspaper clippings, unraveling a web of deceit that spanned generations. The more they dug, the more enigmatic the story became. Their once beloved home transformed into a place of mystery and intrigue. The walls, once silent witnesses to bygone eras, now whispered secrets of the past. With each new discovery, the sense of unease deepened, casting a shadow over their peaceful abode. The investigation took an unexpected turn when hidden compartments were found beneath the bedroom floorboards, revealing a trove of identities linked to Alina Winters. The true extent of Margaret Cavendish's deception began to surface, shattering the illusion of a simple home sale. Forensic teams descended upon the property, unearthing long-buried truths that threatened to rewrite history. The wall writings, once dismissed as mere scribbles, now held the key to a decades-old mystery. Alina Winters' remains, buried in the backyard, bore witness to a tragedy long forgotten. As the pieces fell into place, a chilling portrait emerged of a disturbed mind driven to the brink of madness. Rebecca Eldridge, the hidden force behind the tangled web of identities, stood at the center of the storm. Her fractured psyche had woven a tapestry of lies and deceit, blurring the lines between reality and illusion. In a final revelation, the truth came to light, a confession of jealousy and betrayal that shattered lives and left scars that spanned generations. The house, once a sanctuary, now stood as a monument to a dark chapter in history, forever marked by the echoes of the past. Michael and Sarah, unwitting players in a drama they could never have imagined, watched as the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The The house that had once been their dream now held a dark secret, a story etched into its very walls, waiting to be discovered by those who dared to listen. And as the night fell, enveloping the house in a blanket of shadows, the secrets of the past whispered their final lullaby, beckoning all who heard to drift into a slumber filled with dreams of mystery and intrigue. Story 14. In the heart of the city, there existed a quaint coffee shop that held secrets as deep as the darkest night. For years, a mysterious man frequented the shop, his presence as constant as the ebb and flow of time itself. His routine was unchanging: same table, same order, same enigmatic silence that cloaked him like a shadow. The barista recognized his face, a familiar stranger in a sea of passing souls, but his name remained a mystery to all. Then, one fateful day, the man failed to appear at his usual haunt. Concerned whispers fluttered through the air like fragile butterflies as the police were summoned to investigate. The officers arrived to find the man's seat deserted, a solitary wallet left behind as a silent witness to his sudden absence. Within the wallet lay a driver's license bearing a photo of the man, yet where his name should have been, there was naught but a blank void, a gaping emptiness that mirrored the enigma of his existence. Upon reviewing the security footage, Detective Sarah Mercer was confronted with a chilling revelation. The man, now known only as John Doe in the annals of the case, had indeed entered the coffee shop, taken his customary place, and then vanished without a trace. Mercer, a stalwart investigator with a mind as sharp as a blade, delved deep into the mystery that shrouded John Doe's inexplicable disappearance. She studied the security footage with a furrowed brow, her fingertips tracing the cold metal table as if seeking a connection to the enigmatic events that had unfolded. The footage revealed the ordinary nature of John Doe, his unassuming presence, his nondescript attire, his solitary demeanor. And yet, his vanishing act defied all logic and reason, leaving behind a haunting mystery that gnawed at Mercer's insatiable curiosity. As Mercer pored over the evidence, a peculiar detail emerged. Each morning when John entered the shop, a subtle flicker of the time stamp on the camera hinted at a disturbance in the fabric of reality, a fleeting glimpse into the unknown forces at play. Driven by a relentless determination to unravel the truth, Mercer returned to the coffee shop, her gaze drawn to an antique mirror that hung between the entrance and the hallway leading to the restrooms. Its ornate frame bore symbols reminiscent of those found in John Doe's cryptic notebook. Upon further investigation, Mercer discovered a hidden chamber behind the mirror, a space that held a trove of identical wallets, each containing a blank-faced driver's license and a leather-bound journal filled with cryptic entries penned by the enigmatic John Doe. The journal spoke of experiments in temporal displacement and identity transference, of window points and crossings between realities. Mercer's mind reeled with the implications of these revelations, each page a portal to a world beyond comprehension. As the tendrils of the mystery tightened their grip on the city, strange occurrences plagued the coffee shop. Reflections moved of their own accord. Phantom sightings of John Doe sent shivers down the spines of unsuspecting patrons, and the boundary between the known and the unknown blurred like a watercolor painting in the rain. It was an elderly woman, Margaret Keller, a former physicist with knowledge of esoteric realms, who shed light on the enigma of John Doe. She revealed his true identity as Daniel Weston, a brilliant mind lost to the mysteries of quantum mirrors and parallel realities. Weston's disappearance, a byproduct of his experiments gone awry, had left a void in the fabric of reality, a void that beckoned Mercer to the precipice of understanding, to the edge of a truth that defied the confines of mortal comprehension. And so, as the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Mercer found herself face to face with a revelation that transcended the bounds of reason. In the shattered remains of the antique mirror, she glimpsed a reflection of Daniel Weston watching himself, two versions of the same man existing in a delicate dance of existence. With a heavy heart and a mind weighed down by the burden of knowledge, Mercer accepted the closure of the case of the man who didn't exist. The coffee shop faded into memory, its walls echoing with the whispers of a tale untold. And as the city slumbered beneath a blanket of stars, Mercer sat on her porch, her pen scratching feverishly across the pages of a notebook identical to Weston's, her gaze fixed on a fragment of an antique mirror that shimmered with the echoes of a reality beyond comprehension. Story 15. The apartment had sat in silence for months, its secrets hidden behind closed doors. When the new tenants crossed the threshold, they expected only dust and forgotten relics of the past. But one door defied their curiosity, sealed shut from within. It was a closet holding more than just old coats and trinkets. As the landlord forced the stubborn door open, the air grew heavy with anticipation. What they discovered within chilled them to the core. The walls bore witness to a silent struggle, etched with deep, uneven scratches as if pleading for release. In the dim corner lay an ancient flip phone, its screen still faintly aglow with an unread message. Detective Morgan Shaw, seasoned in the ways of darkness, felt a shiver run down her spine at the sight. It wasn't the presence of blood or violence that unnerved her, but the silent screams etched into the wood, a testament to someone trapped, fighting against the confines of the closet. Forensics now, she instructed her partner, Officer Reed, who diligently captured the haunting marks on camera, and dig up the records of the previous tenant. The message on the phone whispered cryptically, "I know what you did." The landlord, fidgeting with nervous energy, shared sparse details about the elusive former tenant, a young woman named Emma Caldwell, who had vanished without a trace, leaving behind unpaid rent. Quiet type, kept to herself, left in a hurry about 6 months back, he mumbled, avoiding the closet's gaze. Never caused trouble. Forensic analysis uncovered a grim truth within the scratches, a mosaic of DNA embedded in the wooden canvas. Most samples matched Emma Caldwell, a 28-year-old woman officially declared missing. Yet two distinct DNA profiles emerged, one unknown to databases, the other belonging to a man supposedly deceased for 2 years. "This can't be right," Shaw murmured, studying the perplexing findings. Emma's apartment whispered of a life abruptly halted, unopened mail, a lone coffee mug in the sink, a bed meticulously made. Phone records hinted at a mysterious figure in her life, a shadowy presence dialing in frequently before her abrupt disappearance. Her sister mentioned a secretive boyfriend, Officer Reed shared. No name, just intense and private. Surveillance footage painted a chilling picture of the night Emma disappeared, a shadow slipping in after her, an obscured figure with a hidden face, following her into the darkness of her own home. The breakthrough came when Derek Mercer's fingerprints were discovered on the closet doorknob from within a man long believed to be dead, his presence haunting the investigation. He staged his own death, Shaw concluded, piecing together the enigmatic puzzle. But why, and what was his tie to Emma? The unnamed DNA sample led them to another missing soul, Lynette Porter, missing for 3 years, her existence intertwined with Emma's in ways unimaginable. Shaw's tenacity unraveled the threads connecting the victims to Derek Mercer, leading them to a remote property shrouded in shadows. Behind those heavy basement doors, they found Lynette alive but broken, a survivor of Mercer's twisted games. "He forced me to watch," she whispered, eyes hollow. "Said I needed to learn my place." Evidence stacked against Mercer, journals of control, photographs of his prey, and damning videos capturing Emma's terror as she was confined. The manhunt spanned borders, a race against time to stop a predator lurking in the shadows. Mercer's capture was a moment of fleeting victory, his intentions more chilling than imagined. A forensic profile painted a portrait of a man who thrived on suffering, reveling in the slow decay of hope within confined spaces. During interrogation, Mercer spoke with eerie calmness, his words chilling the air. "She sent that message herself," he claimed, dismissing Emma's final plea for help. The trial unraveled the elaborate facade he had constructed, a web of deceit spun to ensnare unknowing victims in his dark fantasies. As the gavel fell, sealing Mercer's fate, Lynette stood tall in the courtroom. "He trapped us in darkness, but I choose the light," she proclaimed, her voice a beacon of resilience in the face of evil. The case reshaped investigative methods, focusing on the intricate webs of relationships and hidden truths within rental properties. Detective Shaw kept a piece of that haunting closet door in her office, a reminder that the true horrors lie not in the blood-soaked scenes, but in the silent struggles etched into the walls by those fighting to escape the shadows. Story 16. She entered through the front door, a dance of dust swirling in the stagnant air. The abandoned house stood frozen in time, its walls shedding memories, its furniture veiled in white sheets. Each step she took felt like a whisper in the stillness, leading her deeper into the mystery that awaited. But amid the eerie tranquility, a peculiar truth lingered the doors. Every door she opened, every handle she turned, only guided her back to the parlor, as if caught in a loop of forgotten echoes. No escape, no exit, except for the path she had tread. Yet when she turned to retrace her steps, the front door had vanished into the shadows. The revelation of Morgan Pierce's fate transformed the decaying Victorian from mere relic to a haunting crime scene. Detective Sarah Lind stood at the threshold, a silent witness to the spectral ballet of forensic experts moving through the dimness like phantoms. The house had woven itself into local lore, a place where compasses lost their way, where whispers of unseen eyes lingered in the air. Now, the walls held secrets far darker than whispered tales of the curious. The initial assessment suggests she passed 3 days ago, the medical examiner murmured, his words barely breaking the silence. Asphyxiation appears to be the cause of her departure. Morgan had been discovered seated in an antique chair in the parlor, her gaze fixed on the entrance as if anticipating a visitor. Serene in repose, hands folded with quiet grace, no signs of struggle, no marks of defiance. The tableau exuded a chilling stillness that even seasoned investigators found unsettling. "Who stumbled upon the scene?" Lind inquired, her gaze drifting over her notes. "A real estate agent showing the property to potential buyers," her partner answered. They entered, beheld her presence, mistaking her for a trespasser until closer inspection. The house had stood vacant since the passing of its previous owner, Eleanor Blackwood, nearly half a decade earlier. Legal disputes had left the estate in a state of abandonment, unwanted, unsold, a fading memory except to vandals and seekers of thrill. Morgan Pierce, aged 26, a scholar delving into architectural enigmas for her thesis. Known for her meticulous nature, her drive, her fascination with spaces that defied conventional norms, The allure of the enigmatic Victorian, notorious for disorienting its guests, must have beckoned to her scholarly curiosity like a siren's call. Her roommate reported her absence 2 days prior, Lind remarked. Morgan spoke of visiting the house where wanderers lose their way for her studies. The investigation unveiled Morgan's multiple visits to the house in the weeks leading to her demise. Her journal entries chronicled strange acoustics, sudden chill zones, and doors that defied logic with each opening. In her final entry, she alluded to bringing specialized gear to capture what she termed spatial anomalies. Yet the equipment remained elusive. The post-mortem examination uncovered an unexpected detailed traces of a rare alkaloid in Morgan's system, derived from a plant utilized in certain shamanic rituals. The substance induced disorientation and vivid visions, yet in quantities insufficient to be fatal. She wasn't one to dabble in recreational substances, her partner defended during interrogation. Morgan upheld strict research standards. She wouldn't have jeopardized her perceptions knowingly. Digital traces divulged fragments of deleted conversations on Morgan's device. Dialogues with a kindred spirit sharing her intrigue for the house, someone claiming to grasp its enigmas. The exchanges grew intimate and cryptic. The house retains its memories, a message read. It yearns for understanding. The trail led detectives to Adam Reeves, an architectural historian who had engaged in correspondence with Morgan. His expertise in rare spatial phenomena had captivated her, evolving their professional ties into something more intimate. When questioned, Reeves bore the weight of her demise with genuine sorrow. The house harbors a reputation, he explained. The original architect wove illusions and distorted perspectives into its fabric. It was crafted to bewilder and confuse. Morgan sensed a deeper truth within something transcending mere tricks of design. Yet Reeves possessed a solid alibi for the estimated time of Morgan's passing. Surveillance footage depicted him lecturing at a university symposium hours away. A breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source, the grandson of a leaner Blackwood, now residing overseas. Contacted by investigators, he unveiled a buried family secret spanning generations. My grandmother wasn't the sole Blackwood to succumb in that house, he disclosed. Others met their end there, always discovered in the parlor, always in peaceful repose. The family dubbed it the calling. He furnished journals dating back decades, detailing fatalities initially attributed to natural causes. The pattern was unmistakable: individuals spending time within the house, eventually yielding to what the family euphemistically labeled the influence. A secondary sweep of the property exposed a concealed compartment behind the parlor hearth. Inside lay Morgan's missing gear and a revelation. A small alcove housing artifacts from diverse indigenous cultures, arranged in a meticulous geometric pattern. At its core rested a sculpted figurine, its features smoothed by generations of touch. Analysis identified the figure as a deity linked to liminal spaces, thresholds between realms. Residues on the artifacts matched the alkaloid detected in Morgan's system. The case veered anew as dust patterns in the house hinted at an additional presence during Morgan's demise. Partial prints, foreign to Morgan or any documented visitor, were retrieved from doorknobs throughout the residence. 3 weeks into the inquiry, Adam Reeves was found lifeless in his abode. Mirroring Morgan's posture, an essence of peace gracing his features, the same alkaloid found within him. Clasped in his grasp, a key unmatching any lock in his dwelling, but aligning perfectly with the concealed compartment in the Victorian. In his final correspondence, sent to himself as a testament, Reeves inscribed, "The house doesn't bind you physically, it ensnares your perceptions." Morgan was correct, the doors lead where they always have, yet something warps your sense of direction. Once you grasp the verity, departure is within reach, yet by then departure holds no allure. The case lingers unresolved, marked as suspicious deaths under scrutiny. The Victorian now stands condemned, its entrance barred by official decree. Yet whispers persist of flickering lights witnessed within on certain nights, of guests who enter but never emerge. Some locals attest the house seizes those who fathom its mysteries too deeply. Others posit Morgan and Reeves unveiled a force ancient and potent, existing within the interstices of conventional reality. The truth lingers elusive as an exit in a dwelling where all doors circle back to the start. Story 17. In the attic's hidden corners, beneath a worn blanket, they stumbled upon a delicate porcelain doll. Its old blue eyes stared wide and unblinking, a mystery to the young couple, Sarah and Michael, who had recently acquired the Victorian house at auction. Enchanted by its ornate woodwork and whispered tales of a troubled past, they brushed off the doll as just another forgotten relic. As night fell and they retired to bed, a subtle shift in the air unsettled them. The silence felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken secrets, and when morning dawned, the doll had vanished from the attic, only to reappear at the foot of their bed, a silent sentinel in the dim light. Detective Rachel Winters was summoned on a crisp autumn morning to a scene shrouded in chilling intrigue. In the master bedroom, a female victim lay in an unnatural pose, eyes wide with terror, while her male companion was found in the hallway, as if fleeing an unseen menace. The meticulous arrangement of the bodies hinted at a macabre artistry, a staged horror that left no room for doubt this was no ordinary crime. Each thread of investigation led to a tapestry of unease woven through the house's history. Neighbors whispered of shadows dancing in empty rooms, of phantom laughter echoing through the night. The forensic team unearthed traces of vintage fabrics, like whispers of a bygone era, lingering around the victims and the attic, where the doll had made its eerie debut. But the most unsettling revelation came from the past tales of a doll maker who had once dwelled within those walls, crafting dolls imbued with a sinister life force. A final creation, a perfect replica of his deceased daughter, bore an uncanny resemblance to the doll haunting Sarah and Michael. As Detective Winters delved deeper, she uncovered a pattern linking the victims, a shared desire to alter the attic space, a space steeped in the house's dark legacy. Old photographs revealed the doll's spectral presence, its form shifting subtly between frames, a silent witness to the unfolding tragedy. Rumors of arcane rituals and bound spirits whispered through the family tree of the doll maker, hinting at a dark legacy that defied rational explanation. The line between the living and the dead blurred in the presence of the doll, its porcelain visage holding secrets that eluded even the most seasoned investigator. The case took a surreal turn when the doll vanished from police custody, leaving behind a trail of confusion and inexplicable gaps in memory. Detective Winters, haunted by the specter of the dollmaker's legacy, made a quiet exit from the force, clutching a forbidden photograph as her only memento of the case. The house changed hands once more, its attic remaining a silent witness to the mysteries that lay within its walls. The doll remained at large, a phantom of porcelain and shadows, weaving its enigmatic presence through the fabric of reality. And on certain nights when the world slept and the moon cast its silver light upon the attic window, whispers of laughter would drift through the stillness, a ghostly echo of a past best left undisturbed. Story 18. The quaint costume shop was in its final days, clearing out its old wares. Amidst the fading inventory, a woman with a curious spirit picked up a mask from a neglected shelf. Its delicate features held a lifelike quality that stirred an unsettling feeling within her. Placing it on the counter, the cashier hesitated, his voice barely above a whisper, "That's not ours." Perplexed, the woman inspected the mask, only to find no tag attached. With a nonchalant shrug, she decided to take it home. That night, a soft sound stirred her from slumber, a whisper of fabric shifting. Her heart quickened as she realized the mask was no longer resting on the dresser where she had left it. Instead, it sat ominously on her nightstand, its gaze fixed upon her. The woman, known as Catherine Reed, was discovered by her concerned neighbor. The front door of her home stood slightly ajar, allowing the morning light to spill into the darkness within. What awaited the neighbor was a chilling scene that would puzzle investigators for years to come. Catherine lay motionless on her bedroom floor, the mysterious mask nowhere to be found. Detective Morgan arrived at the scene as forensics meticulously documented every detail. The click of shutters punctuated the hushed voices as they delved into the enigmatic circumstances surrounding Catherine's demise. "Not a trace of forced entry," remarked an officer, his pen scratching against the notepad. The detective, her keen eyes sweeping the room, noticed subtle clues that hinted at a hidden truth. A drawer left slightly ajar, a lipstick-stained water glass on the nightstand, mundane, yet somehow significant in the grand scheme of the mystery. The medical examiner, with a somber expression, noted the absence of apparent injuries or signs of struggle. He drew attention to Catherine's frozen expression of terror, a haunting testament to the fear that gripped her in her final moments. Catherine, a reserved art appraiser known for her keen eye for authenticity, had lived a life shrouded in quiet diligence. Her colleagues spoke of her discerning nature, her ability to spot even the subtlest of forgeries. Could her astute perception have inadvertently led to her tragic end? The investigation took a peculiar turn when security footage from the costume shop unveiled a perplexing interaction. The cashier's genuine confusion over the mask's origin raised more questions than answers. A visit to the now emptied shop revealed a disconcerting tale of masks with mysterious pasts intertwined with tragic deaths. A breakthrough emerged when forensic analysis uncovered microscopic fibers entwined in Catherine's fingertips. These fibers, a perplexing blend of human hair and an unidentified organic substance, hinted at a connection to something beyond the realm of the ordinary. The investigation unearthed a chilling pattern of similar deaths spanning decades, each victim acquiring an ominous mask before meeting their untimely end. The retired detective, a repository of past mysteries, shared a startling revelation, a ritualistic link tied to the masks and ancient symbols hidden within. A journal concealed behind a loose baseboard in Catherine's apartment shed light on her harrowing discoveries. Her frantic entries detailed a malevolent presence lurking within the mask, a sinister entity that sought new hosts through a cycle of death and transference. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, the cause of Catherine's demise was revealed: a fatal heart-stopping terror induced by the malevolent force residing within the cursed mask. Surveillance footage captured a figure donning the mask, leaving Catherine's home with an eerie familiarity that sent shivers down the investigators' spines. The hunt for the elusive mask led to a vintage shop across the country where it had mysteriously reappeared. However, the mask slipped through their grasp once more, sold to an anonymous buyer, leaving the case officially unsolved. The detective, haunted by Catherine's journal and the chilling truth it unveiled, kept it close as a grim reminder of the inexplicable evil that lurked in the shadows. In the stillness of the night, a sense of unease would wash over her, a lingering reminder of the malevolent force that awaited its next unwitting victim. The mask, a silent harbinger of doom, bided its time, waiting to ensnare another soul in its relentless cycle of death and transference. Its empty eye sockets fixed upon the unknowing, hungry for the essence that dwelled behind mortal, eyes a dark legacy that spanned centuries and persisted, unyielding, in the shadows of the night. Story 19. The town kept silent about the house on the edge of the woods. It stood solitary, its windows darkened, its porch weighed down by the passage of time. No one laid claim to it, no one could recall its builder. Yet when a group of hikers strayed too near, they beheld an eerie sight, names etched into the wooden siding, carved deep like for warnings. At the base of the list, fresh and untouched, was a name unknown to any of them, until a whisper, quivering with fear, broke the silence. "That's mine." Amidst the night, a call came through. Dispatch logged it as a routine trespassing report. The voice at the other end belonged to Mason Wright, the lead hiker who stumbled upon his name engraved on a forsaken house. The responding officers anticipated mere mischief, perhaps a teenage prank among companions. However, what they encountered surpassed all expectations. Detective Sarah Keller arrived as darkness cloaked the forest. Her flashlight pierced the shadows, revealing the worn façade of the structure. The names, 27 in total, descended vertically down the eastern wall. Some had faded with time, nearly vanishing against the weathered wood. Others remained crisp, as if freshly carved. And at the bottom, Mason Wright, the incision still carrying remnants of sawdust. "I've never set foot here before," Mason asserted, his words forming mist in the frigid air. "I cannot fathom how anyone would know my name." The inquiry commenced with background checks on each listed name. The findings sent shivers through the detective team. Every name belonged to an individual reported missing over the past 4 decades. Some cases had grown cold, others remained active. Yet all shared a chilling similarity: the persons had vanished while hiking solo. Forensic analysts meticulously documented each carving, noting the differing depths, techniques, and weathering patterns. The oldest name, Rebecca Hansen, tied to a missing persons case from 37 years prior. Case files recounted a young woman who ventured into those woods and never returned. Search parties uncovered naught but a lone hiking boot beside a stream. Detective Keller extensively interrogated Mason. His account remained unwavering. He bore no ties to the area beyond this particular hiking expedition with 4 college comrades. They had chosen the trail at random, influenced by an online suggestion. Nothing in Mason's background linked him to any of the other names on the wall. The focus of the investigation shifted to Mason's companions. Emily Chen, the group's photographer, supplied images captured during their hike. Upon review, analysts detected something unsettling: a blurred figure lurking in the background of 3 separate photos. The form resembled a tall, slender man, always partially obscured by trees. "We encountered no one else on the trail," Emily asserted. "We would have remembered." Detective Keller ordered a search of the house interior. The edifice appeared deserted, dust blanketed every surface, furniture lay in disarray. Yet in the basement, officers stumbled upon a disquieting sight. Personal effects belonging to the missing hikers sat neatly arranged on wooden shelves. Watches, backpacks, cameras, wallets, each item labeled with a name corresponding to the wall outside. Evidence technicians worked meticulously, documenting each item. Under ultraviolet light, blood patterns materialized on the concrete floor stains accumulated over the years, attempts made to scrub them clean. Ground-penetrating radar unveiled no buried bodies beneath the house, yet cadaver dogs repeatedly signaled near the densest part of the property. As the investigation intensified, Detective Keller observed peculiar behavior from Mason Wright. He reported strange incidents, whispers outside his apartment, footprints in fresh snow leading to his door but not away, figures observing from the street. The department assigned an officer to guard him, yet Mason's paranoia escalated. The breakthrough occurred when researchers unearthed land records concealed in county archives. The house had belonged to a reclusive hunter named Victor Blackwood. Neighbors seldom glimpsed him, recounting brief encounters with an unsettlingly tall, gaunt man who shunned conversation. Blackwood vanished without a trace 15 years past, his disappearance never formally probed. Detective Keller secured a warrant to delve deeper into the surrounding forest. The search party stumbled upon a network of rudimentary hunting blinds strategically situated along popular hiking routes. In one, they discovered a journal filled with meticulous observations, details of hikers, their paths, gear, and routines. The handwriting mirrored samples from Victor Blackwood's scant documents. The journal entries grew increasingly disturbing over time, transitioning from hunting animals to hunting humans. The manhunt for Blackwood spanned multiple jurisdictions. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging scoured the forest. Tactical teams meticulously combed through every crevice and cavern. Yet the suspect remained elusive. Mason Wright ceased answering calls. Officers dispatched to his apartment found it vacant, the door unlocked. On his bedroom wall, freshly etched, read a solitary line, "The hunter becomes the hunted." The search for Mason persisted fruitlessly for weeks. Then, during a secondary sweep of Blackwood's house, forensic technicians unearthed a horrifying revelation. Concealed behind a false wall in the basement lay a small workshop containing woodworking tools, jars of wood preservatives, and a freshly carved piece of wood bearing a new name not yet displayed on the exterior wall. Detective Keller recognized the name instantly. It belonged to the chief forensic technician who had processed the house during the initial investigation. The technician had called in sick that morning, unreachable by phone. Authorities established a continuous surveillance perimeter around the house, monitoring every approach. Motion sensors stood poised for intrusions. The trap was set. 3 nights later, sensors alerted. Security footage captured a figure emerging from the forest, impossibly tall and thin, moving with unnatural grace. The figure advanced toward the house, unfazed by the surveillance. As tactical teams closed in, the cameras momentarily lost connection. When the feed resumed, the figure had vanished into thin air. To this day, the house remains under constant surveillance. Mason Wright and the forensic technician were never located. The investigation persists, with additional resources allocated as similar disappearances surface in other wooded regions. The names on the wall have attained a legendary status among law enforcement. Some officers refuse to utter them aloud, while others shun the case entirely. Local hikers now steer clear of the house, fearful that even mentioning it might result in their names joining that dreadful list, the names never spoken. Story 20. The old box lay hidden beneath layers of forgotten belongings in the dusty attic of the house, a relic from a time long past, a time of memories and secrets. Among the faded Polaroids of birthdays and gatherings, there was one that stood out, one that held a chilling mystery. In that final photo, taken in her very own living room, a family sat on the familiar couch, bathed in the soft light filtering through the curtains. But they were not her family. And behind them, almost imperceptible in the shadows, stood a figure, a man, watching. Rebecca shivered as she gazed at the photograph, her fingers trembling slightly, causing the edges of the Polaroid to quiver. The family in the picture, with their smiles frozen in time, seemed oblivious to the danger lurking just beyond their sight. She descended the creaking wooden stairs, feeling the weight of the house pressing down on her, suffocating her with its silence. Placing the photo on the cold kitchen counter, she scrutinized it under the harsh glare of the fluorescent light. The resemblance between her home and the strangers in the image was uncanny. The familiar archway, the intricate molding, the bay window that once welcomed the morning sun. This was her house, yet these people were unknown to her. Detective Morgan arrived, clad in a worn leather jacket that whispered of past investigations. His keen eyes surveyed the photograph with a meticulous gaze, his gloved hand tracing the edge of the Polaroid. "What do you know about the previous owners, the Nelsons?" he inquired, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room. Rebecca confessed her lack of knowledge, explaining that the Nelsons had already left the state when she bought the house. Morgan nodded, betraying no emotion. "May I take this? Our team might be able to identify the family," he proposed, his tone unreadable. And so the investigation began, a quiet unraveling of the house's history. The Nelsons had acquired the property from the Crawfords, who in turn had inherited it from the Mornos. Detective Morgan delved into old records, interviewed former neighbors, pieced together a timeline of occupants. A breakthrough came unexpectedly. A retired mail carrier recognized the family in the photo as the Sutherlands, who had resided in the house for a fleeting year before vanishing without a trace. Their disappearance echoed those of the families before them, sudden, unexplained, leaving behind no trail. Forensic analysis dated the photograph to 15 years prior, revealing subtle clues of its staged nature. The timer setting, the unnatural stillness of the subjects all pointed to a deliberate composition. But the enigmatic figure in the hallway remained a mystery, a silent sentinel watching from the shadows. As the investigation deepened, a pattern emerged. Families had come and gone from the house, each lasting precisely 1 year before disappearing. Rebecca, only 4 months into her residency, found herself entangled in a web of unanswered questions. Digging into the house's past, the detectives uncovered a dark chapter. The architect's sudden disappearance during construction, the completion by a shadowy figure named Samuel Whitfield, whose eerie resemblance to the man in the photo sent shivers down their spines. Beneath the cold concrete of the basement, buried secrets lay waiting to be unearthed. The missing families preserved in a macabre tableau, their final moments frozen in time. Among their belongings, the same camera that had captured their fleeting happiness, their unknowing proximity to the lurking presence. The house became a crime scene, sealed off from the world, its walls whispering of untold horrors. A hidden crawlspace in the attic revealed a chilling truth, a makeshift sanctuary for the observer, a journal filled with chilling observations, a plan unfolding in the shadows. Rebecca sought refuge in a hotel guarded by the police, but even there she was not safe. The ringing phone in the dead of night, the haunting sound of breathing, the mechanical click of a Polaroid camera capturing her fear. The mystery remained unsolved, the house standing silent, its secrets buried deep. Samuel Whitfield, if that was his true identity, remained elusive, a specter haunting the memories of those who dared to seek the truth. And in the darkness, new photographs developed, new families unaware of the eyes watching from the shadows, the cycle destined to repeat itself. As the investigation continued, the watchers remained unseen, their presence felt in the stillness of the empty rooms, in the shadows that danced on the walls. The truth lingered just out of reach, a puzzle waiting to be solved, a mystery that refused to be forgotten. Story 21. Renovations always bring to light the forgotten and the peculiar. Old newspapers, broken trinkets, faded photographs. However, when Sarah and Michael decided to uplift the floorboards of their new Victorian-era home, they unearthed more than they had bargained for. Nestled beneath the wood, a neatly folded letter awaited discovery. The paper was fragile, the ink a ghostly whisper of words, yet the message it bore was crystal clear. Don't trust the one who knocked. Before they could process the cryptic warning, a series of sharp raps resounded through the empty corridors of the house, sending shivers down their spines. Sarah and Michael had been captivated by the home's intricate moldings and storied past when they purchased it at an estate auction. Little did they know that their endeavor to restore its former glory would unveil a dark secret lingering in the shadows. Detective Alina Reed arrived at the scene with her partner, the exposed floorboards revealing a hidden void beneath. With hands weathered by years of investigation, she gingerly retrieved the ominous note, already tainted by the unsuspecting touch of the homeowners. Reed observed the couple closely as they recounted the unsettling knocking they had heard. Genuine fear flickered in their eyes. Background checks on Sarah and Michael yielded nothing alarming. A young couple with promising futures, their innocence seemed unquestionable. However, the house itself bore a tapestry of untold tales. Previously owned by the enigmatic Hargrove family for generations, it had stood empty for 2 years following the passing of its last inhabitant, Margaret Hargrove, a reclusive widow with no known enemies and a peaceful demise. Despite the lack of apparent leads, a sense of unease lingered in the air. Forensic analysis dated the mysterious note back approximately 2 decades. The handwriting bore traces of anguish, hinting at a time of distress and urgency. Margaret would have been in her twilight years then, residing with her late husband, Franklin, whose own demise preceded hers by 5 years. As Reed delved deeper into the murky waters of the past, she uncovered unsettling truths about the Hargrove family. Franklin, a revered retired teacher with a penchant for woodworking, had seemingly harbored a growing sense of paranoia in his final years. A former student recalled his mentor's descent into fear, hinting at shadows that haunted his later days. A breakthrough emerged during Reed's conversation with Margaret's aging sister, whose fading memory held a key to the enigma. In hushed tones, she confessed, Margaret feared the one who knocked in the end, not Franklin, no, the collector. Franklin's gambling debts had attracted the attention of a nefarious figure known as Victor Mercer, a lone shark whose ominous presence loomed over the Hargrove household. Returning to the house with a team of forensic experts, Reed led the search for answers beneath the very foundation that sheltered dark secrets. The discovery of a male skeleton, bearing signs of a violent demise, tied a chilling thread between past and present. Dental records confirmed the identity as Victor Mercer, a man who had vanished without a trace 2 decades prior. Further excavation uncovered a wallet within the plastic shroud, the ID inside sealing Mercer's fate as a predator of the shadows. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place as Margaret's hidden diaries painted a portrait of fear and desperation, of a harrowing pact sealed in blood and silence. With justice finally served, Sarah and Michael made the decision to part ways with the haunted house, unable to bear the weight of its dark legacy. The property stood silent and abandoned, its walls whispering tales of bygone sorrows and unanswered questions. Local whispers spoke of spectral echoes reverberating through the halls in the still of night, a haunting reminder of the past that refused to be forgotten. The enigmatic note, now preserved in evidence storage, bore a chilling admonition: don't trust the one who knocked. Margaret's secrets remained veiled in shadows, leaving Detective Reed to ponder the enigmas that lingered beyond the surface of truth. Some mysteries, she reflected in her final report, are destined to elude closure, their echoes resonating through time like whispers in the dark. Story 22. She never fancied venturing up there, but circumstances dictated otherwise when a storm revealed a leak in the roof. The attic loomed with a forgotten aura, shrouded in layers of dust and intricate cobwebs. Within the shadows of the farthest corner rested an ancient dollhouse, its eerie intricacy captivating, with its minuscule furniture meticulously arranged. Yet, as she gazed into its miniature world, a knot twisted in her stomach. Tiny figures within were not mere dolls, they were delicate, hand-carved replicas of her family. Each figure meticulously placed, mirroring the exact positions of her family members downstairs, except for one. The figure meant to represent her stood by the attic door. Rebecca Morgan traced her finger along the dollhouse roof, feeling the indentation where the small wooden figure stood frozen in time. A chill ran down her spine, unrelated to the cold draft whispering through the attic rafters. This dollhouse had no place here. This wasn't her childhood sanctuary, but a rental property her family had recently moved into. Rebecca's frantic call to law enforcement marked the beginning of a perplexing case. Officers arrived at the suburban abode to find a distressed family, refusing to ascend the stairs back to the attic. Detective Sarah Harmon, the lead investigator, initially brushed off their concerns as a practical joke or the imaginative musings of a family acclimating to a new environment. However, the intricate details of the dollhouse figures caught her attention. Each minuscule figurine encapsulated a distinct trait of a family member: the father's receding hairline, the son's favorite hoodie, even the mother's small birthmark. The investigation took a chilling turn when forensic teams uncovered unidentified fingerprints on the dollhouse, coupled with microscopic cameras discreetly embedded in the eyes of each miniature figure, all linked to a sophisticated surveillance system concealed beneath the dollhouse itself. Analysis of the Morgan family's movements unveiled a disconcerting revelation. The positions of the figures in the dollhouse not only mirrored their locations on that particular evening, but replicated exact postures from multiple days, hinting at a prolonged period of observation. We realized we weren't dealing with a mere stalker, elucidated Detective Harmon. The perpetrator exhibited an unprecedented level of fixation seldom seen in criminal psychology. The discovery of a concealed basement entrance behind a false pantry wall unraveled further mysteries. Inside, investigators stumbled upon a makeshift living space, indicating someone had clandestinely inhabited the premises prior to the Morgan family's arrival. Food remnants, water bottles, and a sleeping bag hinted at the intruder's prolonged stay beneath the unsuspecting family. The absence of forced entry confounded the investigators, as property records disclosed the house's vacancy for nearly a year before the Morgans' occupation. Interviews with neighbors yielded sparse leads, except for a senior lady who sporadically noticed lights in the house during its unoccupied period. Breakthrough emerged through digital forensics, tracing the surveillance data to an external server with an IP address pointing to a modest apartment across town. Inside, a chilling array of photographs depicting the Morgan family and former house occupants adorned the walls. Detailed journal entries chronicled the daily routines of each family member with unsettling precision. The most alarming revelation was a workshop housing numerous incomplete dollhouses, each representing various residences in the vicinity. The apartment belonged to Martin Wells, the son of the previous homeowners, entangled in financial turmoil following his parents' demise. Instead of selling the property, he crafted a covert living space, cohabiting while collecting rent from oblivious tenants. The dollhouse served as his command center, expounded the cases assigned forensic psychologists. Each figurine symbolized an individual under his watchful gaze. Rebecca's positioned figure by the attic door wasn't a threat, but an acknowledgement of her discovery of his voyeuristic scheme. During interrogation, Wells maintained an eerie composure, attributing his actions to a sense of ownership. They resided in my home, in my parents' room. I needed assurance of their reverence, he professed. Regarding the arranged figures, he simply stated, I wanted them cognizant of my perpetual vigilance. Psychological evaluation unveiled a convoluted narrative of possessive delusion. Wells sought to cope with the loss of his childhood abode by constructing an elaborate system to assert dominance over the property and its occupants. The dollhouse metamorphosed into a conduit for his possession of both the residence and its inhabitants. The Morgan family never set foot in the house again. Rebecca recounted the most haunting realization wasn't discovering the dollhouse, but comprehending its implications. We were unwittingly observed, our lives scrutinized, transformed into mere pawns. The true horror wasn't the dollhouse itself, but the realization that, in his eyes, we were playthings to be manipulated and observed. Wells faced multiple charges encompassing stalking, invasion of privacy, illegal surveillance, and trespassing. The case spurred a reevaluation of real estate disclosure laws concerning property deaths and agents' obligation to ensure proper vacating before new occupants ingress. During sentencing, the judge underscored the egregious violation inflicted upon the Morgan family. You didn't merely intrude into their residence, but compromised their safety and autonomy. You monitored their intimate moments, recreating them for your gratification. What unsettles criminologists is the potential longevity of Wells' covert operations had Rebecca not stumbled upon the dollhouse. Examination of his journals hinted at a prolonged clandestine residence within various homes for nearly 2 years, transitioning from one property to the next, crafting dollhouses for each observed family. The Morgan family resettled in a distant locale, yet Rebecca confessed in her victim impact statements to recurrently checking closets and hidden spaces. All dollhouses and miniatures were banished from their new dwelling. Some days I sense an unseen gaze upon me, she confessed. I ponder if somewhere, a miniature version of myself is still being maneuvered in an undiscovered dollhouse. Martin Wells' saga uncovers a chilling narrative of obsession and possession, a cautionary tale of boundaries obliterated and lives usurped by a malevolent voyeur. Story 23: The Enigmatic Manor. The new homeowners perceived it as a mere quirk, how the old intercom system crackled late at night, a relic from another era, rewired but long forgotten. One night the husband, driven by curiosity, pressed the button. A whisper crackled through the speaker. "Why did you come back?" Startled, he recoiled, his hands trembling. His wife, positioned behind him, softly murmured, "I never said that." The Victorian manor nestled among ancient oak trees, its aged exterior contrasting with the modernized interior. Daniel and Meredith Parker had acquired the property at a surprisingly reasonable price, despite the real estate agent's uneasiness during the walkthrough. The vintage intercom system, connecting all rooms, had enticed the history-loving couple. Detective Sarah Reeves arrived at the property, the gravel crunching beneath the tires of her unmarked vehicle. Initially reported as a potential break-in, something in the dispatcher's tone hinted at a deeper narrative. Daniel Parker, tall and pale, welcomed her at the entrance, leading Detective Reeves through the grand foyer. It all began with the intercom, he recounted, as static turned to whispers and then coherent sentences. My wife thought I was imagining things until she heard it too. In the living room, Meredith sat rigid on an antique sofa, hands tightly gripping a steaming mug left untouched. We found something behind the wall, she disclosed abruptly. Daniel wanted to expand the kitchen pantry, and when he removed the drywall, her voice faltered. Concealed behind the wall, wrapped in decaying plastic, lay a small leather-bound journal. Detective Reeves, donning gloves, delicately unfolded its brittle pages. The elegant yet frantic handwriting belonged to Alina, the previous owner, detailing her suspicions of her husband Vincent's sinister intentions. The last entry, 30 years old, marked the end. The previous owners had bought the house from an elderly man who relocated to a retirement community. Vincent and Alina Blackwood's ownership was confirmed, but after Alina's disappearance, Vincent sold the house. No divorce, no change of address, no financial transactions in Alina's name since her final journal entry. Further investigation unveiled anomalies beneath the garden shed's concrete foundation. Breaking through the aged concrete revealed human remains, a woman in her 40s with signs of blunt force trauma. A gold wedding band inscribed to Alina, "My eternal love," confirmed her identity. Vincent Blackwood's guilt became evident. Vincent confessed to silencing Alina, fabricating her departure with forged postcards and deceiving the neighbors. The trial was swift, with Vincent pleading guilty to murder. The judge acknowledged the calculated crime and decades of deceit. Daniel and Meredith sold the house, unable to reside there after uncovering its grim past. Before departing, they held a memorial for Alina in the restored garden. The intercom system, removed by subsequent owners during renovations, emitted static and whispers during the process, attributed to interference. Detective Reeves revisited the Blackwood case file, pondering how the house had unveiled its secret across time. Vincent faced justice thanks to Alina's voice transcending time. The case earned the moniker, "The House That Answered Back," among local law enforcement. Detective Reeves passed by the property on her way home, slowing down with the window cracked, listening for whispers carried on the breeze but never stopping. Story 24, The Mystery of the Doppelganger. She cleared the mist from the mirror, gazing at her reflection, but a sense of unease crept over her. Her features appeared normal, her attire unchanged. Yet an unsettling feeling lingered as she stared longer. A flicker caught in the periphery of her vision, a movement not of her making. And when she turned away, her reflection remained unmoving, observing. Thus began the enigma of Rebecca Thorne, unfolding from that eerie moment in her bathroom. What transpired next would baffle investigators and haunt the community for years to come. Rebecca resided in a modest apartment in a serene suburban enclave, leading a solitary existence. Known as meticulous and introverted, she maintained a polite distance from her neighbors while upholding amiable interactions. Her occupation as a data analyst at a mid-sized firm dictated her life with routine and precision. No one could have predicted she would become enmeshed in one of the decade's most confounding criminal inquiries. The initial anomaly seemed trivial. Rebecca noticed slight displacements of objects in her living space, nothing missing, merely rearranged. A mug shifted to another shelf, books realigned, her toothbrush relocated. She brushed off these peculiarities as lapses in memory, attributing them to long hours spent engrossed in work under harsh fluorescent lights, straining her eyes over spreadsheets. Detective Marion Shaw received the first complaint when, after enduring weeks of such disturbances, Rebecca finally sought help from the authorities. Initially deemed non-criminal, the situation appeared more suited for mental health services than law enforcement. Shaw documented the grievance but filed it among the heap of low-priority cases. There was no tangible evidence, Shaw later testified. No signs of forced entry, no missing belongings, just a woman sensing an unsettling presence in her own home. The pivotal moment arrived with the bathroom mirror incident. During her subsequent contact with the police, Rebecca recounted the event vividly, the disconcerting movement of her reflection, the sensation of being under surveillance even when alone. This time she presented proof, surveillance footage from a camera she had installed at her front entrance. The recording revealed something that elicited a shiver even from the most seasoned officers. The grainy video depicted Rebecca departing for work in the morning, followed 20 minutes later by someone identical to her using a key to enter the apartment. Forensic analysts scrutinized the footage for signs of tampering or digital manipulation, finding none. The individual mimicking Rebecca moved with her mannerisms, attire, even carrying her distinctive leather bag. However, time-stamped footage from her workplace security system confirmed that Rebecca had already swiped into her office building on the other side of town. "We're facing a doppelganger scenario," Detective Shaw informed her superior. "Someone who has meticulously studied Ms. Thorne and can replicate her with uncanny precision." The investigation deepened. Fingerprints within the apartment matched solely with Rebecca's, and no foreign DNA was unearthed. Neighbors reported no unusual sightings, just Rebecca going about her daily routine. Mrs. Keller, a neighbor, noted encountering Rebecca upon her return one evening but receiving no response, a deviation from her usual behavior that struck her as odd but not alarming. Rebecca commenced documenting the disturbances in a journal. Minor alterations within her home escalated. Unfamiliar food vanished from her fridge, her computer displayed searches she hadn't conducted, and most unsettlingly, she discovered selfies on her phone resembling her yet taken without her recollection. In some pictures, her expression seemed subtly distorted, the smile too wide, the gaze too intense. "I feel as though I'm losing my mind," she confided to Detective Shaw during their third meeting. "Or perhaps someone is attempting to convince me of it." A breakthrough emerged when investigators discerned a pattern in the security footage. The doppelganger only infiltrated the premises when Rebecca departed for specific engagements, therapy sessions, yoga classes, Sunday morning grocery trips, predetermined activities with predictable durations. "Someone intimately familiar with your routine," Shaw elucidated. "This isn't random, it's targeted surveillance and infiltration." A forensic psychologist posited that they were dealing with a fixation case, a person fixated on assuming Rebecca's identity, living her life, and conceivably aiming to supplant her entirely. Such instances were exceptional but documented in psychological archives. The perpetrator typically underwent a mental rupture, fixating on a victim representing something they coveted: stability, beauty, success, normalcy. The investigation narrowed focus when Rebecca mentioned a former coworker, Lily Winters, dismissed due to escalating erratic behavior. Lily had closely collaborated with Rebecca, often remarking on their similarities. Post-termination, she sent Rebecca a series of disconcerting emails. "We could be identical," one message read. "At times, I feel more like you than you do." Detective Shaw secured a warrant to search Lily's residence. Their findings escalated the case from disquieting to horrifying. A room in Lily's abode had been transformed into a shrine-like replica of Rebecca's bedroom. The walls were adorned with hundreds of snapshots capturing Rebecca entering her apartment, shopping, socializing, taken unbeknownst to her. A closet housed replicas of Rebecca's attire, alongside makeup matching her preferred brands, laid out on a vanity along with meticulous notes on her behaviors, speech patterns, and daily routines. Particularly damning were the practice videos Lily had recorded herself mimicking Rebecca's gait, gestures, expressions. The evolution was apparent, initial attempts awkward and conspicuous, later ones nearly indistinguishable from the authentic Rebecca. "She aspired to become me," Rebecca murmured upon viewing the evidence. "She wasn't merely imitating me, she was erasing me." Forensic experts uncovered sophisticated equipment for replicating keys and cloning electronic access cards. Lily had orchestrated an intricate system to monitor Rebecca's movements, including a calendar with precise predictions of her schedule. What remained elusive was Lily's ultimate objective. Journals recovered from her residence contained rambling entries alternating between first and third person, occasionally referring to Rebecca as both me and her within the same paragraph. The concluding entry sent chills down investigators' spines. "Soon, only one of us will prevail. The stronger version will endure." Upon the authorities moved to apprehend Lily, she had vanished. Her residence bore signs of a hasty departure, drawers left agape, certain devices missing. A nationwide alert was issued. Rebecca was placed under protective custody, relocated to a secure haven under constant surveillance. For 3 weeks, authorities monitored every location linked to her previous life. Lily never materialized. The case assumed a disquieting twist when a security guard at Rebecca's former workplace reported an anomaly. Rebecca had been sighted entering the premises despite being on leave. Security footage corroborated the account. A figure identical to Rebecca had accessed the building using a valid ID card, proceeded to her previous workstation, and spent 40 minutes perusing her files before departing. Meanwhile, the real Rebecca remained secluded in a safe-guarded refuge. The implications became stark. Lily hadn't fled, she had made her move. She was now assuming Rebecca's identity, slipping into her existence while the genuine Rebecca remained concealed. The case remains officially unresolved. Lily Winters remains at large. Rebecca Thorne chose not to resume her former life, forging a new identity in an undisclosed location. Detective Shaw preserves a photograph on her desk, 2 women strikingly alike. One is Rebecca Thorne, the other Lily Winters. At times, she scrutinizes their countenances, seeking the disparities, the subtle hints that set them apart. The truly alarming aspect, Shaw imparts to new recruits, isn't that someone can resemble you or sound like you. It's the desire to assume your identity so fervently that they obliterate themselves in the process. Identity isn't solely what we exhibit to the world, it's what we safeguard most vigilantly. And sometimes we only realize its worth when someone endeavors to pilfer it. Story 25. A mysterious package arrived one day, nestled within a plain envelope devoid of any return address. Inside lay a solitary brass key, its surface weathered by the relentless passage of time. The homeowner, upon laying eyes on it, couldn't shake off the strange sense of familiarity it evoked within her. Though she tried the key in every lock she possessed, not a single one budged. It did not belong to her. Yet when she placed it delicately upon her coffee table, a haunting sound reverberated through the stillness of her home. The old grandfather clock in the hallway emitted a solitary, melancholic chime, despite its inner workings having long fallen into disrepair. Sarah Miller, unsettled by this inexplicable occurrence, promptly reported the peculiar incident to the local authorities. What initially appeared to be a mere fluke swiftly unraveled into a perplexing enigma, casting a shadow over the otherwise peaceful suburban neighborhood. The responding officer at first brushed off Sarah's concerns, attributing the key's arrival to a possible mix-up. However, Sarah's unease persisted, her gut instincts whispering of something amiss. Reluctantly, the officer accepted the key as evidence, sealing it within a small evidence bag that would soon become the linchpin of a sprawling investigation. The case file eventually found its way to Detective Robert Harmon during the early hours of the morning briefing. A seasoned investigator with the Special Victims Unit, Harmon possessed a keen intuition for cases that transcended their seemingly innocuous beginnings. The brass key sat upon his desk, outwardly unremarkable, yet exuding an aura of disquiet. Background checks unveiled Sarah's pristine record. No hint of wrongdoing tarnished her past. A retired high school English teacher, widowed, with grown children scattered across the country. No red flags waved in her financial records, phone logs, or digital footprint. She appeared precisely as she presented herself, an unwitting recipient of a cryptic gift. Forensic analysis yielded no fingerprints on the key besides Sarah's own. The envelope bore no traces except for a standard postmark from the regional distribution hub. DNA testing yielded no leads, no trace evidence to follow. The key itself, a common Schlage, weathered and aged, bore no distinguishing marks apart from years of use. A breakthrough materialized unexpectedly when Detective Harmon decided to run the key's unique bidding pattern through the department's database. A cold case from 7 years past surfaced, documenting an identical key pattern linked to a storage unit where investigators had unearthed a gruesome trove, blood-stained carpet, sharp implements, and photographs of unidentified women. The original investigation had stalled, lacking the evidence needed to unmask a suspect. Harmon delved into the dusty case files, tracing the steps of the retired detective who had once pursued the enigmatic key's origins. The storage unit had been rented under a false identity, paid for in cash. Surveillance footage had long faded into oblivion. Collected evidence offered partial DNA profiles but no matches within criminal databases. Photographs recovered from the unit depicted 5 women, all seemingly in a state of unconsciousness. Only 3 had been identified during the initial inquiry reported missing, yet never found. Their disappearances lingered as open wounds, classified as suspected homicides without bodies to mourn. When Sarah Miller gazed upon the photographs, she recognized none of the women captured within their frames. Her anxiety mounted as the investigation unfolded, prompting her to fortify her home with additional security measures. The looming question persisted: why had someone chosen to bestow this key upon her? Harmon, wrestling with the enigma, ordered a fresh analysis of the original evidence employing modern techniques. The partial DNA sample expanded, culminating in a distant familial match, a second cousin twice removed from the enigmatic suspect. Tracing the convoluted branches of family trees led investigators to Harold Jenkins, a former neighbor of Sarah's who had vanished from the neighborhood some 6 years prior. His current whereabouts remained a mystery. Further scrutiny unveiled Jenkins as a former substitute teacher at the same school where Sarah had once taught, their paths intersecting minimally. His employment records painted a patchy history marred by unexplained gaps and frequent relocations. A search of his former abode yielded no sinister revelations. Neighbors remembered him as unassuming, blending seamlessly into the backdrop of suburban life, another shadow slipping by unnoticed. The burning question lingered: why this key, why now, and why Sarah? Harmon mulled over the possibilities, each more chilling than the last. Was it a trophy, a foreboding message, or a twisted invitation? The hunt for Jenkins surged forward, his digital footprint vanishing into thin air. No credit card activity, no renewed licenses, no trace of his existence beyond memories and whispers. The harrowing truth unfurled when authorities uncovered a secluded cabin registered to Jenkins' now-deceased mother. Beneath the creaking floorboards lay a hidden chamber accessible only via a discreet trapdoor. Rows of meticulously arranged shelves harbored scores of identical brass keys, each tagged with a name and date. 5 keys aligned with the women in the photographs, while the remaining 27 whispered of unspoken horrors, additional victims concealed from the light of justice. Buried behind the cabin, forensic teams unearthed human remains, their silent testimonies echoing through the desolate landscape. Sarah found herself under constant protection as the nationwide manhunt for Jenkins gained momentum. Behavioral experts theorized that the key symbolized a demented offering, a macabre gesture aimed at Sarah as an audience to his malevolent deeds. The moniker, the Keymaster, splashed across headlines, instilling dread in hearts across the nation. Fear gripped the community, shattering the illusion of safety that had cloaked their serene existence. Detection dogs traced a scent through the wilderness, search teams scouring dense forests, and drones mapping the terrain from above. The pursuit swelled into a monumental effort spanning the annals of regional history. A solitary wildlife photographer navigating remote woods captured a fleeting image, a figure mirroring Jenkins' description, a specter vanishing into the shadows of nature's embrace. Authorities closed in, establishing a perimeter, preparing for the inevitable showdown. The final act unfurled when a patrol officer crossed paths with Jenkins near a river's edge. Rather than surrender, Jenkins retreated, seeking refuge atop an abandoned fire tower. Negotiations echoed through the stillness, met with silence. Tactical teams breached the tower, only to discover Jenkins lying lifeless, a self-inflicted wound claiming his last breath. Beside him rested a journal chronicling his atrocities, beside a familiar brass key identical to the one Sarah had received. In a watertight container, investigators unearthed a cache of evidence, each item a macabre piece in a twisted puzzle, an archive of horrors spanning a decade. The journal's final entry bore Sarah's name, the chilling words haunting her in perpetuity. The investigation unearthed 32 victims, lost to the shadows until now. Families long haunted by uncertainty found closure in the confirmation of their worst fears. Sarah, unable to face the echoes of terror that had brushed against her life, abandoned her home to the specters of the past. The grandfather clock, once a harbinger of eerie chimes, concealed within its aged frame a tiny wireless receiver, a silent sentinel transmitting Sarah's every move to Jenkins. The case, a stark reminder of the monsters that lurk behind ordinary masks, remains etched in the annals of infamy. Researchers pore over Jenkins' writings, seeking to unveil the telltale signs that might unmask future predators before their shadows darken more lives. And in a quiet evidence locker, rows of brass keys stand as silent sentinels, each a token of lives cut short, unlocking a chilling truth about the darkness that sometimes slumbers beneath the veneer of normalcy. Story 26. The dwelling had sat untouched for an age. Whispers from the neighbors spoke of its vacancy since the day the young woman vanished without a trace. When the new occupants crossed the threshold, they encountered a peculiar sight, a bedroom sealed shut as if guarding a secret. With effort, they forced the door ajar, unveiling a room frozen in time. The air hung heavy with neglect, dust dancing in the muted light. Yet, amidst the stillness, something stirred unease within them. The bed lay pristine, the mirror devoid of smudges. A lone candle stood on the desk, its wax weeping silently onto the surface, frozen tears of flame. And there it lay, the notebook, its pages whispering untold truths in fresh ink. The final entry bore the date of her disappearance, a haunting message etched in desperation. Detective Morgan delved into the cryptic words as forensic experts combed the room for lingering echoes of the past. The script belonged to Elise Winters, a young soul lost to the shadows nearly half a decade ago. Her penmanship flowed with precision across the pages, except for the final entry where urgency bled into the paper, imprinting a plea for understanding. "I sense his eyes upon me tonight," the last words echoed. The familiar car circles unseen. My cries for aid fall on deaf ears. Should the worst come to pass, know it was no chance encounter. Closing the journal, Morgan secured it in evidence, the room clinging to a scent of aged dust and an elusive chemical hint. The landlord lingered in the doorway, haunted by the unlocked mystery before him. "We scoured every inch ere listing it," he murmured, pallor betraying his unease. "That door was never locked before." Elise, a diligent paralegal at Harriman and Associates, had stumbled upon discrepancies within the Westridge acquisition files before her vanishing act. Colleagues painted a portrait of a meticulous yet withdrawn young woman, unraveling beneath burdens unseen. Late nights consumed her, her supervisor revealed, shedding light on a darkness that consumed her days. The photographs of Elise portrayed a figure of poise and purpose, yet hidden layers hinted at a soul teetering on the edge of revelation. The chamber divulged little, a frozen tableau of a life interrupted. No traces of struggle stained the tranquil scene, no crimson trails marred the serenity. It was as though Elise had stepped away momentarily, destined to return. The candle, a monument to solitude, bore witness to secrets untold, its scentless wax a testament to silent vigils. "What say you, dear colleague?" Morgan inquired of the forensic lead. Fingerprints aged and fading, yet the absence raises questions. The doorknob pristine, the windows scrubbed clean of all trace. The search led to hidden recesses, unveiling a concealed trove beneath a loose floorboard, a waterproof vessel cradling a key and a flash drive. The key unlocked a vault at Northern Trust Bank, revealing further revelations in the form of encoded data and damning files. Financial dealings intertwined with deceit unfurled before the investigators, a web of deception binding Elise's fate to powerful hands. Digital echoes whispered of manipulated truths and silenced voices, exposing a dark underbelly of corporate malfeasance. The truth, long shrouded in shadows, emerged with a clarity that pierced the veil of lies. The path to justice twisted and turned, leading to Harriman's downfall as evidence mounted against him. The enigma of the locked room held firm until a revelation dawned upon Morgan, a hidden passage veiled behind the bedroom wall, a conduit to a realm of secrecy below. Vincent Harriman's reign of shadows crumbled as the truth unfurled, sealing his fate in the echoes of a past he sought to bury. Justice, though delayed, found its mark upon the guilty. The specter of Elise's disappearance dissolved under the weight of evidence, revealing a tale of betrayal and retribution. The courtroom bore witness to the unraveling of a web of lies as Harriman's deceit crumbled beneath the weight of Elise's legacy. Her mother's voice echoed through the hallowed halls of justice, a plea for remembrance of a daughter lost but not forgotten. The house, a silent sentinel of secrets laid bare, stood abandoned once more, its walls holding echoes of a battle fought in shadows. Locals skirted its perimeter after twilight, tales of a spectral light flickering in the upper chamber where justice met its reckoning. Elise's room remained a testament to her courage and defiance, a shrine to the truth she unearthed in her final hours. The house whispered of her presence, a guardian spirit watching over the threshold between light and darkness. In the end, justice found its mark, not in the flesh, but in the enduring testament of a life lived in pursuit of truth. Story 27. The old wooden plank let out a soft creak as she stepped on it, a subtle shift that caught her attention. Curiosity sparked. She knelt down, running her fingers along the edges, sensing a hidden space beneath the supposedly solid floor. With meticulous care, she lifted the boards, unveiling a dark, narrow void beneath the house. At first glance, all she saw was dust and cobwebs. But as her eyes adjusted to the dimness, shapes emerged from the shadows: a mattress, a chair, and tucked away in a corner, a worn notebook filled with pages bearing a singular name, her name repeated endlessly. Detective Morgan Reed stood silently behind Sarah Coleman as she peered into the abyss below her newly acquired home. The fear that gripped Sarah's gaze went beyond mere surprise at discovering a hidden chamber. It spoke of a profound violation, an intrusion of sinister intent into what should have been a fresh beginning. "Please don't disturb anything else," Detective Reed's voice rang out, a steadying presence in the unsettling moment. Clicking on her flashlight, she cast a beam that pierced the darkness, revealing walls plastered with surveillance photographs, snapshots of Sarah going about her daily life, unaware of the voyeuristic gaze that had been fixated on her. A shrine of obsession meticulously concealed beneath her very feet. Sarah had bought the quaint cottage from the estate of an elderly recluse named Walter Green, who had passed away with no known kin. The property had sat vacant for months before Sarah's purchase, described in the real estate listing as charming and in need of minor touch-ups. No mention had been made of the hidden secret that lay dormant within its walls. "I never met him, the previous owner," Sarah murmured. "Neighbors said he kept to himself. I was told the basement was sealed off long ago. That's what the inspection report said." Crime scene investigators arrived, their equipment clattering against the wooden floors as they delved into the hidden chamber. Every detail was meticulously documented, every piece of evidence cataloged, including the mattress, chair, and haunting notebook. Forensic analysis revealed a labyrinth of fingerprints belonging solely to Walter Green, a revelation that sent shivers down the spines of those present. What disturbed the investigators most was the timeline they reconstructed. Through utility records and dated photographs found in the secret room, it became evident that Walter had been shadowing Sarah for a minimum of 3 years prior to his demise. He had woven himself into her world, a ghostly presence she had never glimpsed. The level of fixation here is concerning, the department psychologist remarked during a debrief. From fantasy to tangible plans, the hidden chamber suggests a chilling progression towards something more direct. Detective Reed's inquiry took a sharp turn upon interviewing a former colleague of Walter's from the maintenance department at a local shopping center. The man's nervous demeanor spoke volumes as he revealed. Walter spoke of her at times, said she reminded him of someone. "I thought it was harmless infatuation. I never imagined." His voice trailed off, haunted by unspoken realizations. Securing a warrant to search Walter's workplace locker, Detective Reed uncovered a key that led to a storage unit registered in his name. The metal door screeched open, unveiling a meticulously arranged replica of Sarah's former apartment furniture, decor, even a mannequin mirroring her appearance at a replicated desk. A calendar marked with a date set just a week post Walter's demise bore a single ominous word: together. Further investigation unveiled Walter's troubled past, marked by a youthful fixation that led to institutionalization for erotomania. Released and seemingly rehabilitated, he had lived a quiet existence until Sarah unknowingly ignited dormant obsessions. Spread across the table at the precinct were crime scene photographs, each a piece in the unsettling puzzle of Walter's delusions. In his mind, they were meant to be together, Detective Reed explained solemnly, a chill settling over the room. Could there have been a chance encounter that triggered this fixation? A fellow detective queried. No evidence suggests so, Reed replied. Sometimes these obsessions need but a fleeting moment, a glance, a smile enough to ignite a dormant flame. Unable to find peace in the tainted home, Sarah made the decision to sell, haunted by the chilling reality that had lurked beneath her feet. As she bid farewell during a final walkthrough with her realtor, she whispered, "I can't help but wonder what might have been if I hadn't uncovered that loose floorboard. How long would I have dwelt here, oblivious to the eyes watching me, to the secrets nestled beneath my sanctuary?" Officially closed after Walter's death, the case was labeled as stalking with intent to abduct, a grim testament to the peril Sarah narrowly evaded. She relocated, altering her routines and guarding her privacy with newfound vigilance. Detective Reed, a silent guardian, occasionally checked in, a reminder of the thin line that had separated Sarah from a darker fate. The cottage passed into the hands of a young couple oblivious to its hidden history. The secret room was sealed off, its contents banished to memory. Life moved forward, but for those privy to the truth, the tale of the concealed chamber beneath the floor remained a sobering cautionary narrative, a testament to the unseen dangers that linger, to the monsters that fade before justice can grasp them, and to the victims who unknowingly skirt the edges of their own demise.